Rogue Knight by Illuviar. 81, Chapter 23, Parts 7 and 8. Disclaimer: I do not own Gundam Seed or Star Wars. They belong to their respective copyright owners. This story is not created with commercial aim. I make no money from it. Phase 23, Politics Mando Style. =RK=. Part 7, Ambassador's Office, Republic Embassy, Mandalore. What do you mean the ambassador was Criffing recalled? I glared at the ranking Republic diplomat left in the embassy, a dark blue Twi'lek counselor. The young man recoiled from my anger and waved his hands in placating gesture. Ambassador Nellius was ordered back to Coruscant to shortly before you arrived, General. I believe that she departed about the same time your ships exited hyperspace. This was a sweet little criff you from Palpatine, I'm sure of it as much. I was sure that he would be placing the blame on someone who's been a thorn in his side within the Republic diplomatic corps. This is bold. Who exactly did you piss off at Coruscant? Helena asked. More than a few people, I'm sure. I sighed. Palpi was getting more and more irritating lately. I might even have to move against him before everything was in place and the war would be all but won. At any rate, that was a few years down the line. I didn't have neither the assets nor the alliances needed to openly attack the Chancellor. I closed my eyes for a moment and ignored the Council, who was busy making excuses. My plans for Mandalore were rather simple. Ensure that Bo-Katan became the new Mandalore, though to pull that off would be a challenge. She simply lacked enough glory and backing to credibly try gaining the position at this time. That's why I planned to gather a significant amount of warriors and clan heads behind the ideals of the honorable warriors of old like Mandalore the Vindicated, and his successor, my friend Stephen Ordo. He was one of the best men I ever knew and would be turning in his grave at seeing what had happened with his people. After that, I was going to propose that they unleashed their warriors to participate in the war until there was someone who proved to be a Mandalore material and could credibly hold the position. If I continued being sabotaged from Coruscant, I might not have a choice but be forced to deal with the Mandalorians once and for all, and that would be a criffing waste. Further, it would be spitting on Ordo's grave and all the times he saved my life. Last time I checked, he actually was ahead. I smiled wishfully. A wave of fury almost overwhelmed me as I thought about all I lost. Everyone I once called a friend had been dead long enough to be nothing more but dust. What the criff I was doing fighting for the Republic? They weren't my people. They and the Empire were gone for millennia. All I had left was a hope to go home to a world and dimension away, to a woman I loved a few lifetimes ago. If I was allowed to, I still remember dying when that superweapon misfired. I clearly remember awakening in my fighter in a system far, far away in a future I barely knew. I remember struggling with memories old and new. Yet, what could I do? What was left? Why did I fight? The faces of Shakti, Obi-Wan, Arya, Bo-Katan and many more flashed before my eyes. People I considered my friends, others who won my respect. The soldiers under my command who looked up to me to get them through the hell that was this war. The woman I might be slowly falling for, and another that I found fascinating. In truth, they were the reason I fought, the only thing I really had in this time and place. As for Natali and Earth, I hoped that one day I would be back, that I would change the fate I knew awaited them. However, I've changed. Once I would have sacrificed the whole galaxy for that goal without a thought. Then I met Vet and later Ashera, along with a lot of people I considered friends and comrades. By the time I fell in love with my late wife, I knew that I would no longer sacrifice everyone here for Nat and Earth. Now, all those years later, I found myself in a similar position. This wasn't a playground or a simple task to be completed. Criffit, I wasn't going to let Stefan's people, no matter how much they had lost their way, burn for the mistakes of a few idiots. It was time to cut some corners and go for a more radical plan. Enough, I snapped. I need your best information about the current clan leaders. Coordinate with the intelligence chief. He better be here. Half an hour. I also need a secure room to place a call from... A couple of minutes later, we were in the basement, where the local intel station comm equipment was based. It was the best I was going to get short of getting up to the Chimera. A few short orders later, and I was alone in front of a heavily encrypted holo communicator. Soon enough, my call came through, and a few minutes later, Shakti, as well as the other people I had requested, were online. While I waited, I cursed the way I lost my composure earlier. It's been a long time since my past before ending in this galaxy bothered me too much. Not to mention the way I've been suppressing what I felt about being catapulted in the future and losing everything. Heh. At least this war was a great distraction and a good way to suppress my grief while I concentrated on commanding and fighting. Besides, a proper Sith would have simply shrugged and started looking for a way to increase his power. In the end, I did the same, just for different reasons. I smiled. Perhaps a pissed-off Sith is exactly what the doctor prescribed to the Mandalorians. A few seconds after the Shakti's holographic image appeared. She looked delicious in the light robes she wore. A moment later, 3 men stepped into view too. The Mandalorians whose presence I had ordered. Their obvious leader was a short but bulky brown-haired man, who looked to be in his early 30s. He was flanked by another man with a bit longer and lighter brown hair. He wore a light grey Mandalorian-styled armor with the symbol of combat medic. The last Mandalorian wearing such eye badge I met was Makeup, the future wife of Mandalore the Dauntless. The last man was almost shaved bald, but I could see a crop of very short black hair. He was the tallest of the 3, though he was athletic instead of being a mountain of muscle. His black armor stood out among the lighter garb of the other people around him. General Vale, this is a surprise. I gather that this isn't a social call. T gave me a small smile when she saw me, but otherwise didn't show nothing but a professional interest. Unfortunately not. The situation here has taken a turn for the worse. General Kal Skirata, Midge Gillimar, and Wallen Vow, I presume? Correct, General Vale. I'm Skirata, what's the problem? The Mandalorian warrior was wary. After all, it wasn't every day that the next best thing to your commander-in-chief called out of the blue, especially if you haven't had any contact with them previously. It seldom boded well too. Barring a miracle, Mandalore is going to be a smoking ball of glass in a couple of weeks. I stated flatly. That got their undivided attention. How well have you kept with news from home? I asked them before they could recover from the bomb I just dropped. Only the man in black armor didn't react. The combat medic gave me a flat look that promised pain and death, while the general simply stared at me. Vale, what did you do this time? Shakti sounded exasperated. Me? I simply had an informal meeting with Duchess Satine. She and the new Mandalorians are finished. Warriors are joining the Criffing Death Watch in droves, and the latter imbeciles are going to either wing control over Mandalore and join the CIS, or launch a coup if they can't take power in a more traditional way. I see. Shakti sighed. I know what you would do in such a case. You know me so well. I teased, earning myself a glare. I need an explanation. Now. Skirata spoke quietly in a voice that broke no argument. That's curious. Besides my clone troopers, you're the second Mandalorian in this day and age I met who actually has a spine. I'm glad that Mandalore the Dauntless still has a few of his people left who are worth something. I gave the Mandalorian a cold smile. The Mandalorian general narrowed his eyes at me. I've heard a lot of rumors about you. That you're a delusional dark Jedi, a Sith who decided that hiding was no longer necessary, even a few claiming that you fought in the Great Galactic War nearly 4,000 years ago. At Coruscant, Ryloth and Geonosis, you proved you know what you were doing. You earned yourself a lot of glory. Skirata gave me a sharp nod of respect at that. Still, a true Sith after all those years and one allied with the Jedi and the Republic. That's hard to believe. We all play the cards we've been dealt. I was part of the Empire once, until a superweapon misfired and threw me millennia into the future. My people are gone. All I could do in their honor now is to hunt down and dispose of the fallen Jedi Dooku who pretends to be a Sith and sullies our name. But we aren't here to discuss my past or people, but Mandalore's future. I'm still waiting for an explanation. Skirata raised his, ordered. Your people are leaderless. The only banner the warriors could gather around is that of the Death Watch. I paused and stared at each man in turn. You've been gathered here by Fett, so I hope that you and your friends on Kamino do believe in the creed of the true Mandalorians. Unless Mandalore unites behind someone honorable, its days are numbered. I can't allow your world to join the Separatists. If the Death Watch start a coup or takes power, Republic forces under my command will interfere and neutralize the threat once and for all. Skirata looked at Shakti, who stared at him for a moment, and then gave him a firm nod. I know what a Sith would do in such a case. I did pay attention during my history lessons. The Mandalorian warrior spoke in a voice that sounded calm. If it wasn't for the Force, it would be almost impossible to sense the emotion in his words. There were anger and apprehension mixed in with fear. You called us for a reason. I would prefer to have your people as my allies once again. The last thing I want is to be the man responsible for destroying Mandalore and breaking the Mandalorians. That's a fate that I want to prevent. I owe that much and more to Stephen Ordo. I called you to ask for help. Help me save your people and bring them up to the standards of honor that Mandalore the Vindicated and Mandalore the Dauntless were famous for. What say you, Cal Skirata, clan leader of Clan Skirata? I asked aloud. =RK=, Part 8, Republic Intelligence Center, Republic Embassy, Mandalore. For nearly a minute I had a staring match with the Mandalorians. What do you intend to do, General Vale? We've been practically ghosts for more than a decade. Our standing at home will be less than impressive after all that time, Skirata stated. For starters, I need to talk with the most important clan leaders, something I believe you can facilitate. I still have a few contacts left. It should be doable. The honor and glory you earned yourself will help in that regard, the Mandalorian general said. Second, the Death Watch are nothing but a bunch of glorified thugs and gangsters. Most of their acts were attacks against other Mandalorians. They need to be exposed for all to see what their misguided ideas really mean. I agree. They betrayed everything a true Mandalorian stands for once. There's no reason to believe they won't do that again. Skirata's voice became frosty. He obviously meant what the Death Watch did during the Civil War, something that, as far as I knew, wasn't a public knowledge. If it was, and they still had such a large support as reported, the Mandalorians were truly lost. It's a wonder what one might find in the Jedi archives. I ran in a few interesting pieces of trivia while I was catching up on history. I smiled coldly. Checking up what happened with the Mandalorians had been high on my priority list after I saw the outcome of the Great War. Criff, the bastards who tore the Empire apart after the Republic fleets were all but destroyed, and the war was for all intents and purposes won. Skirata froze. You have proof about their treachery? I do. However, considering that it comes from the Jedi archives, it's not exactly credible. It's better than what we have. However, it's been a long time. Fett killed the bastard who engineered the betrayal. The proof is worth less today than it would have been a decade ago. What else? We provoke the Death Watch, make them show their true colors, then we challenge their leaders to a single combat and deal with them. A dangerous gamble, worthy of a Mandalorian. Skirata nodded. I obviously earned myself a notch of approval in his eyes. The big problem's that we currently don't have an unifying figure. No one with a sufficient claim to become Mandalore anyway. That's a big concern. My initial plan was to keep the situation from exploding for long enough that someone could spread their wings and cover themselves in glory during the war. That's no longer a viable plan. What then? Discredit the Death Watch and hope for the best. Do it and improvise. The alternative is that Mandalore burns. What else do you want from us? Gather as many commandos and Mandalorians you can find on Camino, then make your way here ASAP. We need to talk in person anyway. We'll leave on the first available transport. Make sure that's well armed. I gave a nod to Shakti and cut the connection. Then I sent an encrypted burst transmission to Bo-Katan. =RK=, Brox's Bar, Sundari Mandalore. After a few hours of who's who in today's clans, I let Helena to get more in-depth information and left the embassy. As far as I knew, Obi-Wan was still trying to smooth over things with his girlfriend. That thought made me smirk. If the woman didn't have her head stuck as deep in her arse as she did, and if Kenobi wasn't still too clingy to the Jedi dogma, my Mandalore problem might be resolved. Obi-Wan certainly was covered with enough honor and glory to qualify for the position, and hooking up with Satine would come with him becoming a part of the Mando culture. That was an interesting idea worth exploring. It took me about an hour to reach my destination, which was an address that Bo sent me while I was busy with the Intel chief. The place made me smile. It also brought a bout of nostalgia. It was a bar just like Stephen would have chosen for clandestine, or well, any meeting in which he might have got away with it. For the Mandalorians, bar were practically a cultural thing, a places to watch some sport, get a drink and something to eat, make a deal and chill off by way of a nice bar fight. The places shouldn't be mistaken with cantinas. First, everyone was much more polite, a result of everyone inside usually being trained and armed killer. Second, in any reputable Mando bar, you couldn't find some usual things about cantinas, the galaxy over drugs, prostitutes and cut purses. Two of those were pure suicide to try, and the last was going to get you thrown out. Outside, the place wasn't anything to write home about, just a sturdy-looking door with a sign above. The interior was much better and brought a lot of nostalgia. There were a lot of tables, with a reasonably large place reserved for dancing in the center. The bar was on the right. It was a slab of dark metal that looked suspiciously like a polished piece of starship hull. It was lined up with sturdy tall chairs, which looked strong enough to easily hold a big guy clad in heavy armor. Good thing too, because I could see 5 warriors at the bar, busy either sipping their drinks or watching a big screen covering most of the wall to the left. Half the tables were filled with dining people. Some were obviously couples. Others looked like squads of warriors out for dinner. The remaining 2 walls were lined up with leather seats surrounding low tables and were submerged into shadows. Above them, I could see a few dozens trophies. All were dangerous predators. The crown pieces were a ranker's head and much more impressive a Terentatek one. I've dealt with a few of the latter back in the day. They were big brutes, heavily armored, fast, vicious, and almost completely immune to the Force. In fact, a handful even fed on it when I tried to attack them that way. I shook my head and enhanced my perception with the Force. The familiar feeling of Bo-Katan immediately stood out. I smiled and headed to the corner seat to my left. A moment later, I enhanced my eyes and could clearly see her despite the shadows doing great job of concealing her. Bo-Katan was wearing armor similar to what she had back on Ryloth, though she was painted in the Death Watch preferred colors. I hoped that she was going to make the right decision. I would hate to have to kill her. 82. Chapter 23, Parts 9 and 10. Phase 23, Politics Mando Style. =RK=, Part 9. Brox's Bar, Sundari, Mandalore. It's good to see you again. I smiled. Then I frowned when Bo leaned forward and I could see her face clearly. I wish I could say the same. Cries grumbled while playing with a cup of steaming kaf. The woman looked rather worse to wear. Her hair was a disheveled mess. Her face was gaunt and pale. That only made the huge black bags under her bloodshot eyes stand off like roadside signs. "Did you try to drink a platoon under the table or something?" I asked and sat down across the table from Bo-Katan. It sounded like a good idea at the time. She gave me a tired smile. It usually does, right until the hangover hits. Don't I know it? Bo sighed and took a sip from her drink. "How do you like today's Mandalore?" she asked morosely. My answer is going to make Jabba the Hutt blush. I deadpanned. I can see that. Damn. Whatever had happened in the last few months had shaken her to the core. "You know, I didn't imagine us meeting again like this," I muttered. "How so?" "I expected that you'd want a rematch after you were loaded for Sith." I smiled. It's been a very long time since I fought a Mandalorian warrior who was prepared to face one of my kind. The thought did cross my mind. Her lips twitched upwards. The implications, however, Bo shrugged. "One of these days I may take you up on that." Oh, she was a Mandalorian. Right. Well, a sparring match with one of her culture could have various implications, some much more important and complicated than others. What? Did I make the big bat Sith speechless? Well, my Mando courting ritual's a bit rusty. Did you just say that you would try to kick my ass and drag me to bed afterwards? If you're particularly good boy. Bo-Katan smirked. Or bad, depending on the situation. I smiled back. It was good to see the spark of life back in her eyes. We'll see. I'm looking forward fighting beside you again. And I hope that would be the case instead of facing you for one last time. The smile and any good cheer I felt bled off me. It was time for Bo-Katan to choose her side. I hoped it would be mine. No more idle chat, eh? Bo finished her calf and looked me in the eyes. You were right. She sighed and slumped back in her seat. The Death Watch? They're no honorable warriors. Slavery, drugs, extortion, common murder, smuggling. Take your pick. Bo hissed like an angry snake. Looking back, a lot of my job's for them. She trailed off and shook her head. I've tarnished my honor, my clan's honor almost as much as my sister does. Ah, that explains a lot. Satini, I don't think you could have possibly criffed up as much as she did. I had a chat with her earlier today, you know. While I criffed up my honor, at least I didn't spit on all that means to be a Mandalorian. Bo laughed bitterly. Yes, she messed up pretty badly. That's an understatement, the Mandalorian woman whispered darkly. You've seen what I sent you. The Death Watch are growing in strength. Warriors are falling over themselves to join without knowing what they are doing. It's all her fault. All? That's a bit much, don't you think? Thanks to my sister, Bo spat. There's no other credible alternative, no one else to rally us. In my time, I would have expected that the Mandalorians would know better. The Death Watch betrayed the last true Mandalorian warriors at the end of your civil war. What makes you all think that they won't do it again? What? Bo hissed. Ah, I thought it was common knowledge. Vizsla, the previous leader of the Death Watch, informed the Republic where the remaining true Mandalorians would be. They sent a Jedi task force which ambushed them. Only one man got away. How do you know that? The Jedi archives. I persuaded them to give me access so I could catch up on history and see what happened with my friends and comrades back in my day. Naturally, the history of Stephen's people was something high up on my list. Do you have proof? Who's Stephen? It's back on the Chimera in orbit. I pointed up. As for Stephen Ordo. We ran into each other more than a few times and become friends. Shortly after the war went hot, he became Mandalore the Dauntless after his predecessor was assassinated by a Jedi strike team. Criff me sideways, you were the Black Knight. Bo stared at me as if I suddenly grew another head. Stephen's to blame for that. I had nothing to do with that nickname. I can't say if you're criffing with me or if you're telling the truth. We both know that I can't possibly prove who I am, not beyond a shadow of a doubt. I shrugged. That was the truth after all. You can't, can you? Bo's enthusiasm took a nosedive, then she grinned at me. We're going to have our spar sooner than later. Combat is the purest expression of oneself. Her eyes gleamed with excitement. I didn't know you subscribed to Echani teachings. Some. Grandma was one before she became one of us. What's with women trying to kill me lately? You're aware that I'm not a Mandalorian, right? Not yet, Bo beamed at me. You might be one when I'm done with you. Oh, I suddenly felt like a steak served to a hungry lioness. You're presuming you could win this time. I smiled back. We'll see who's the hunter and who's the hunted. This time I know who and what I'm facing. Damn, she was serious. Unless the Mando culture had radically changed. Criffit. There were certain things expected of you if you hooked up with a Mandalorian, like becoming one. Mind you, I was interested in Bo-Katan. She was a fascinating woman, a great warrior, with fiery temper and a figure to die for. Then there was Shakti, my maybe lover too. I was most definitely interested in her, though I still didn't know if it was because of herself or because of her resemblance to my late wife. How the criff did I get myself in this mess anyway? Damn it, this was going to further complicate the situation. Do you really? I teased. I couldn't help myself and started digging a deeper hole. Well, I'll know for sure when I'm done with you, Bo declared cheekily. She sighed. However, I don't believe you called me just to arrange for our spark. I'm glad you've seen the Death Watch for what they're. I would hate to see you on the wrong side of the battlefield. Me too, Bo muttered softly, though it would have been a battle to remember. She perked up. Mandalorians. You're better apprised of the local situation than me. How long until your former colleagues could try seizing power and succeed? I spoke quietly. Direct action. 2, 3 weeks tops. The old-fashioned way? A few months unless the government falls, then much sooner. Sooner it is. Satine's position won't survive the pressure of the Republic and CIS. Well, well, I expected that the Republic would be supporting her. Bo leaned forward. That's certainly a surprise. It's a mess. I'm the Republic negotiator. Unless Mandalore allies with us, I'm to remove it as a threat, I whispered. That certainly shocked Bo. The blood drained from her face. She was one of the few people who not only knew that I was a Sith of old, but believed it beyond a shadow of a doubt. She knew that I wasn't bluffing or exaggerating. I could feel her shock. Soon it was supplanted by a silver of fear, but mostly anger. Damn, she looked like a vengeful goddess of war when angry. Then the Death Watch needs to go, Bo stated flatly. My thoughts exactly. =RK, Part 10, Royal Gardens, Sundari. Royal Palace, Sundari, Mandalore. Flowers from all over the galaxy thrived under the protection of environmental shields. Their alcoves were separated by alleys lined up with carefully trimmed bushes, which were barely tall enough to reach Kenobi's knees. The place was breathtaking, yet Obi-Wan barely noticed. He had eyes only for Satine, who was radiating so much anger that the Jedi could swear that he could see. The Duchess suddenly stopped and turned to face him. What was that? Satine snapped and pointed an accusing finger at his chest. You're supposed to be a Jedi. Her eyes flashed with unbound fury, a representative of the Republic. Satine actually poked him in the chest. Yet you just stood there while that man threatened to burn Mandalore, the Duchess hissed. Obi-Wan averted his eyes. She was right, yet it was no longer so simple. What would you have me do, Satine? Kenobi sighed. You're right. He raised his hands in surrender. As a Jedi, I should be doing what's best for peace. I should be doing my best to protect Mandalore. That gave Satine pause, her fury subdued to merely boiling anger. Yet you said nothing to contradict that man, she growled. I'm a Jedi, a sword protector of the Republic. What am I supposed to do when, in order to preserve it, I may have to ensure that Mandalore doesn't become a threat in this war? Obi-Wan exclaimed. We're no threat. We're peaceful people, Satine exclaimed. You are. The new Mandalorians, too. Kenobi nodded at her while speaking softly. I can't say the same about the Death Watch and everyone supporting them. Satine recoiled as if he just slapped her. Damn them, the Duchess hissed. Damn the warrior culture that still haunt us. Obi-Wan had to take a step back from the sheer loathing that Satine radiated for a moment. Her shoulders slumped and she stared at the floor. Will you allow it then? Will you simply watch my world burn and do nothing if the warmongers prevail? I don't know. I don't know what to do, Obi-Wan admitted. I'm a Jedi, a general serving the Republic. He laughed sadly. It should have been easy to do the right thing. Instead, he trailed off. As a Jedi, as a general, I would have to prevent Mandalore joining the enemy and becoming another threat by any means necessary. As a Jedi, I should be seeking a peaceful resolution of this conflict. Bombarding, much less burning down this world, should have been unthinkable. Kenobi shouted. The Republic. Satine trailed off. What about it? The Republic I know wouldn't condone destroying a world because it might be a threat. That's what the Separatists would do. Fear, desperation. Obi-Wan shrugged. Take your pick. The Republic hasn't been the same since Naboo and Coruscant. We all made mistakes. We lost our way. That would be a cold comfort for my people. I know. We, the Jedi, no longer control the army. If we ever did. Obi-Wan sighed. The best we could do is try mitigating the damage and try to end the conflict as soon as possible. That's it? Satine exclaimed. It is, Obi-Wan smiled sadly. We can no longer stop the war if we ever could. We don't have the influence to prevent the Senate and GAR High Command from carrying out a plan if they're determined to execute it. We can only quit, and then we would have no say at all in how this conflict is prosecuted. Satine simply stared at him. Her eyes were wide with disbelief. We made too many mistakes. While a significant number of generals are Jedi nowadays, We have much less say in strategy and tactics than we had when the war started. We lost a lot of our credibility and influence. Instead, you're all following a Sith, Satine snapped. Kenobi nodded numbly. How can you justify it? Del-Qatar wins. He's one of the main reasons why we didn't lose dozens more Jedi when the temple was attacked. Most importantly, he's not as limited as we are when fighting the war is concerned. It's not that he's a better general, though he is for now at least. It's the fact that he can implement tactics and strategies that are usually unthinkable for Jedi like me. He fights and commands like a monster. That's one way of putting it. It's true. Satine. On Geonosis, he ordered orbital strikes on towns and cities where the enemy was either hiding or had installations. Millions died, yet not a single non-Jedi officer had a problem with that. If we went in there to clean those places in a way that any Jedi, myself included, would have deemed acceptable, I know it was wrong. I could feel all those people die, Obi-Wan shouted. He was shaking with emotions he could no longer suppress. Satine stared at him in shock. Why? She whispered after they were silent for a couple of minutes. Why didn't I protest? Why didn't I stop the slaughter? Obi-Wan grimaced. Doing so would have broken our army. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers would have died. It might have doomed us in the long term. The Separatists could replace their losses faster than we can. If the ground forces we led on Geonosis were lost, Kenobi sighed. Besides, doing so would have meant betraying every man and woman who followed us down on Geonosis, every sentient fighting for the Republic across the galaxy. That's not what a Jedi should be thinking, Satine whispered. No, it's what a general should think when he considers throwing an army into the meat grinder. Obi-Wan muttered. He had to fight to keep away flashbacks of Ryloth and the way he let down his men. What about you, Obi-Wan, not the Jedi? Satine came a step closer. Not the general. Another one, and she was almost touching him. What about the man standing in front of me? What do you want? What do you fight for? She asked and stared in his eyes. Her feelings were confused. Obi-Wan could feel her subduing anger, confusion, fear of her world and people, longing. What do I want? Kenobi muttered. That was a question he hadn't asked himself in a very long time. There was always something more important to deal with rather than seek an answer for that particular question. I want the war to end. He stared in Satine's eyes. Obi-Wan trailed off and leaned over her. Their lips touched, and Kenobi was lost to the taste of vanilla. 83. Chapter 24, Parts 1 and 2. Phase 24, Mandalorian Dreams. =RK=. Part 1. Brox's Bar. Sundari Mandalore. How did you make the Republic find its balls? Bo-Katan asked me after a few seconds of silence. That was all the Seps doing. They made my life much easier. Yes. They apparently had that childish notion that they can attack, bomb, and enslave, yet no one would be doing the same to them and their allies. The red-headed woman chuckled humorlessly. It's too bad that my world might burn as an object lesson. Not if I have anything to say about it. You're in charge, so don't bomb us to the Stone Age if certain idiots join the Separatists. Bo smiled at me. That's something I can't do even if you're the one asking. Too bad. Perhaps after I handle you your ass? Perhaps. Do you have credible proof about your friend's extracurricular activities? A bit. Not enough to bring them down. Bo-Katan pouted. However, enough to convince you. More than enough. She glared at the table. Are you ready to join me? We have a lot to do. Bo looked me in the eyes and nodded. I stood up and offered her my hand when the Force screamed a warning. I moved without thinking and tackled Bo, who was too surprised and slowed down by the hangover to offer any real resistance. Acting on a combination of instinct and experience, I used the telekinesis to flip the table and place it between us and the rest of the bar. In the same time, I grabbed the Force and put it as a barrier. The world ended in thundering roar and a wave of fire. =RK=. It's confirmed, boss. She's meeting that Republic general. Goran Kranz, one of the Death Watch's old hands, spoke clearly in the comm unit of his helmet. He and his squad of warriors had been keeping an eye on Bo-Katan ever since she came back from Ryloth and started nosing around. Their leader found her new hobby interesting and charged Kranz's mercenaries to find out what it was all about. At the beginning, actually trailing her without being noticed proved to be very hard. They often had to abandon the hunt or be detected. Fortunately, a couple of months later, Catan started getting a bit sloppy. That coincided with her finding about some of the more sensitive activities of the Death Watch. Goran still didn't see what the problem was. Their organization had bills that needed paying, and some of the jobs came with delicious benefits. For some reason, Bo-Katan didn't agree. No one would have really cared. It wasn't like their membership was to the death or something. Unless you decided to betray the Death Watch. Unfortunately for Bo-Katan, she did so. Kranz was the first one to actually catch her, sent a heavily encrypted transmission through the HoloNet. That by itself wasn't too suspicious, though with Catan snooping around. The second transmission had been detected, copied, and after a few weeks under the mercies of Death Watch decryption specialists, read. The first sign of alarm was the encryption. It was undoubtedly GR, but much better than anything the organization had tried to break before. The contents of the message: a list of the lucrative businesses run by the Death Watch, sealed Bo-Katan's fate. That's why she was sent to a suicide mission in Hutt space, leading a squad of green warriors. Then she had the temerity to succeed. After that, the traitorous woman had been busy trying to drown herself in a booze. Kranz had been ready to try taking her out himself when she had gotten a holocall. From what little he was able to overhear, whoever she's been selling the Death Watch to would be arriving soon. That bought her a bit of time. When Goren brought that bit of info to the leader, he ordered Kranz to wait until the meeting took place, find out who was Catan's accomplice, and call back. I see. Is your squad in position? Kranz glanced around the small apartment they had rented across the street from Catan's favorite bar. His warriors were lounging in the living room, clad in their armors and armed to the teeth. We're ready. Take them out. It will be a pleasure. We have green light, Goran announced once the connection with command was cut. It's criffing time. Mac, the demo expert of their small band, grumbled. A pity. I quite liked her. How, their pilot and sniper quipped. You just wanted to fuck her. The only woman in the group. Dora sneered. That's what I said. Howe shrugged. Enough. We have to deal with a Sith wannabe. Kranz snapped, making his people chuckle. Dora, Howe, the speeder and heavy repeater. Mac, put a rocket in the bar on my signal. The rest of you, come with me. A few minutes later, Goran was across the street from the bar. He was flanked by Torn and Leo, the close combat specialists. The speeder that would be providing getaway was parked next to them, and Dora was in the back, ready to open the side door and let loose with the repeater. Mac was still upstairs, where he had a rocket launcher ready. Kranz nodded to his men and they took cover behind the speeder. Do it, he ordered. A moment later, an AP rocket roared above their heads and struck the heavy door of the bar. The obstacle, along with a large section of the surrounding walls, simply ceased to exist. Before anyone knew what was happening, Mac shot an HE warhead into the bar. The following explosion turned the interior into a slaughterhouse. Without waiting for a prompt, Dora opened the speeder's door and lit up the bar with the heavy repeater. All that would have been an overkill against most people. Kranz knew better. He made a hand gesture and threw a pair of sonic grenades into the bar. His men followed suit a moment later. That should have been enough to disorient even a Force adept. Then a spread of frag grenades followed, while Mac repelled from the apartment. Goran slammed his fist in the side of the speeder 3 times, and Dora stopped firing. She shoved the repeater aside, grabbed her rifle and jumped out. Kranz shouldered his heavy blaster rifle and gestured his squad to move in. It was time to make sure that Bo-Katan and her buddy were vaporized. =RK=. Part 2. Brox's Bar, Sundari Mandalore. A spread of concussion grenades detonated moments before Kranz and his squad stormed the burning bar. Goran led the way, trusting that his armor can take a shot or two if any one of the patrons had survived the onslaught, no matter how unlikely it was. Dora and Mac dashed left, while remaining men swept right. The sensors in Goran's helmet allowed him to see clearly despite the smoke filling up the burning bar. Kranz smiled once he saw that there was no one moving, and he allowed himself to examine the place. Most of the furniture sans the bar plot was wrecked, tables and chairs were torn to shreds. A few were actually melted too. The same could be said for the patrons. Those who wore armor were relatively intact. The rest, well, they were literally blown to pieces. Their blood was coating the floor and walls. So much for that so-called Sith, Mac sneered. True, no one could have survived this. Dora nodded. She was looked at a fully armored Mandalorian warrior who had been caught in the crossfire. His armor was heavily dented, and she could see blood leaking from cracks in the helmet. That was the most intact corpse in the room. Find and vape the targets, then we're gone, Goran ordered. He didn't feel like playing with the security forces. The boss wanted a relatively clean op. Sure that Dora never finished her sentence. Before she or Mac could react, they were swept away by a table that was warped and full with holes. The improvised projectile caught Leo in the shoulder and threw him over the bar. Goran and Theo wasted no time. They dived to the debris and blood-covered floor, then opened fire at the corner where the table stood. Kranz cursed when every shot was met and deflected by an angry crimson blade. He looked up and saw the man wielding it. It was that Republic general, and he looked furious. "Mow them down," Goran shouted and aimed at the hilt. That at least would make it almost impossible to deflect the shots back at him. Dora didn't bother getting up. Instead, she shot a missile from her wrist-mounted launcher. Kranz could see a look of contempt passing through the Force user's face. The man flicked his fingers in a dismissive gesture. The rocket that was almost upon him made an almost 180-degree turn and roared back at the Mandalorians. Sith spar. Theo's scream was cut short by a deafening explosion. The shockwave scattered the Mandalorians. It shoved and dragged Goran over the floor. He barely kept his gun and wits. A moment later, he was up on one knee and shooting while ignoring the ringing in his ears. The sound dampeners in his helmet saved his hearing, but were unable to totally compensate for the almost point-blank explosion. Dora slammed into him with enough momentum to make him dizzy. Kranz blinked stars away. Then he did so again, because he was seeing purple. Then he heard Leo's inhuman screams. He looked left and blanched. Leo was suspended in mind air by a torrent of lighting that was running up and down his armor, which was melting. Mac sent a pair of blaster shots at the Republic scum that was murdering Goran's team, though it was futile. The shots were deflected in an almost lazy manner before another figure rose from behind the general. Kranz snarled as he saw the traitor alive and unharmed. Katan didn't have a scratch on her, the bitch. Her appearance kicked Goran's mind back into high gear, and he jumped up on his feet. Kranz had lost his rifle, so pulled a heavy blaster pistol, then charged the Sith. He hoped to distract him, giving either Mac or Dora a chance. Instead, Bo-Katan drew her pistols and opened fire. A moment later, Mac went down under a hail of bullets. Goran snarled. His shots were battered away, however he was close enough. A flick of the wrist and the flamethrower built in his left arm. Guard roared to life and sent a stream of liquid fire at the Jedi Sith. The man in black smirked and raised a hand in a halting gesture. The torrent of fire met an invisible wall and was harmlessly redirected at the ceiling. In the same time, Katan saw Dora, who was still dizzy, and shot her like a dog. Two baleful yellow eyes stared straight into Kranz's soul. The Mandalorian's fingers became soft like butter, and he dropped down his blaster. He felt his body being squeezed by an industrial press before a lance of lighting slammed him into the far wall. =RK, =. I let the concentrated lighting storm go. The assassin I caught with it fell to the ground and continued to bake under his half-melted armor. "Are you all right?" I asked Bo, despite feeling her bright presence in the Force behind me. "I'll live," she groaned. Another armored Mandalorian charged through the door and opened fire. I deflected his shots and glared at him. He took one good look at the carnage, dropped his rifle, and dashed back through the door. "Oh no, you don't," I snapped and charged after him. The man dived in the driver's seat of a nearby large speeder, which had its side door opened. The machine was already running, so it took him a single moment to try driving away. "No," I hissed and raised a hand. The speeder's engine strained, struggling against my telekinetic grip, and lost. I let my lightsaber go and guided it back into my robes, then I raised my right hand and concentrated. I let the dark side flow through me, then channeled its energies into my right palm. A few seconds later, a meter-long spear of pure dark side energy materialized in my hand, making my skin tingle with power. I threw the projectile at the struggling speeder. The Mandalorian jumped away in the last second. The dark spear tore through the speeder as if it was made of cardboard, passed through the driver's seat, and slashed the power cell. A moment later, the machine spluttered and died. The last assassin found his balls, drew a blaster pistol, and opened fire at me. I sneered at the criffing bastard and pointed my right hand at him. It was still covered with dark side energies, which I reinforced before. Slapping away the blaster bolts, screaming at me. It was time for a lesson. I concentrated and pulled even more energy in myself. When the next shot came, I extended my will over it and placed it into a force-derived stasis field. Then I crushed the blaster pistol shooting at me and the hand holding it. The Mandalorian screamed in pain, but despite the ruined arm, his attention was stuck on the last blaster bolt. It hanged frozen in mid-flight. It was jibing an unpleasant buzzing sound as its energies struggled against the stasis field. Well, that's new. Bo-Katan whistled from behind. I glanced back to see her dragging the assassin's leader. Her emerald eyes were fixed on the blaster bolt, and she had a hungry smile on her face. 84, Chapter 24, Parts 3 and 4. Phase 24, Mandalorian Dreams. =RK=. Part 3, Brox's Bar, Sundari Mandalore. I looked at the gathering crowd around us. More than a half of the people were armed and armored Mandalorians. The local security services were arriving too, though most were slowed down by the people surrounding us. The Mandalorians were radiating anger, curiosity, some even disgust. A lot obviously didn't like the fact that someone started open warfare in their capital, without warning and inviting them. Others were appalled at the sight, though they were a distinct minority of the people gathering here. "What the criff did you do to my bar?" A deep voice shouted above the whispers of the locals. A barrel-chested, armored Mandalorian shoved his way through the crowd until he could clearly see the demolished building behind us. "Hi, Brox," Bo waved cheerfully. "This is exactly what it looks like. You and the rest of the Death Watch fools got too drunk and shoot up my bar." The 2 meters tall Mandalorian rumbled and pointed an accusing finger at my companion. He paid no heed to the would-be assassin I had suspended in the air or the hovering blaster bolt. "You walked straight into this one." I chuckled. "Who the criff are you?" Brox growled and turned his helmeted head my way. "General Del-Qatar Vale, the Dark Lord of the Sith at your services." I gave him a respectful nod. "Those idiots," I pointed at the Death Watch wannabe with the crushed hand, "tried to assassinate my friend over there and me. They weren't up to the task," I shrugged. It was a pathetic attempt, really. My bar and patrons would disagree. Brox glanced at the smoking ruin. "Survivors?" "Just us and 2 prisoners." Bo answered, "Criff." Mandalorian security finally arrived. Most of them wore either light armors or the ceremonial garb of the palace guards, complete with energy pikes. They took one look at the devastation, the armors worn by my prisoners and Bo, then raised their weapons our way. "Drop your weapons and raise your hands. You're under arrest." The man in charge, an LT, ordered us. "No," I stated flatly. "I'm General Vale, representative of the Galactic Republic, and thus covered under diplomatic immunity. Those," I pointed at the captives, "are Death Watch agents who just tried to assassinate me. They committed an act of war against the Republic and are prisoners of war. I'm being generous in not assuming that all Mandalorians nowadays are supporters of the Death Watch. A bunch of cowardly thugs, smugglers, pirates and slavers who know no honor." I paused for effect and stared at the LT. "Chose your next words very carefully, Lieutenant." "What about her?" The Mandalorian pointed at Bo-Katan. "She's with me." "That's not good enough, General." "I say it is." I raised my hands and pulled force energies through me. A moment later, electricity arched around my fingers as I prepared to unleash a lighting storm if the local security services proved too bullheaded. I had my doubts that Bo would go quietly and that she would be safe if in custody. Assassinating her while temporarily imprisoned would be much easier. "What the criff are you all doing?" Brox snapped. Well, I'm not surrendering either myself or one of my associates in the hands of people who might be Death Watch or CIS supporters. Besides, those don't look like they're up to the task of capturing me. I could feel it in their emotions. Most of them are no warriors. I smiled thinly. That's a lie. We're here to uphold Mandalorian law, the LT snapped back. Mandalorian law? I think not. New Mandalorian Bantha Pudo. That I'll give you. I smiled. Last time I was here, dealing with a bunch of fools who attacked you while you had a drink in a bar was something no one would have bat an eye at. Besides joining the fun in crushing the fools who started the mess. That's been unacceptable ever since the Civil War. Is it really? I asked, addressing the crowd. So neither of you can legally deal with someone being foolish enough to attack you while you're having a drink or a bite to eat? I thought that I was on Mandalore, surrounded by Mandalorians, but I'm obviously mistaken. There were both laughter and jeers coming from the crowd. One thing was sure, everyone on the planet would soon know about this accident, and some of them would start asking pointed questions. Sir, But, I see. The LT spoke to someone over his comm. General Vale, he hissed my name. Your presence has been requested in the royal palace. That of your companion too. Well, well. So Satine would want to slap my wrist for protecting myself. How did she get in charge of Mandalore, I'll never know. These idiots are coming with me to the Republic Embassy, and then we'll see what your supposed leader has to say about this mess. I stared at the LT. He listened to someone over his comm and nodded sharply. That will be acceptable. RK Satine's chambers, Sundari Royal Palace. Sundari Mandalore. What? This better be important. Satine snapped after she found her comm. Ma'am, there was some kind of an attack in the city. Explosions and heavy blaster fire were reported. I see. Keep me informed. The Duchess cut off the line. I have the strange feeling that Del-Qatar is a part of this, Obi-Wan muttered. The Jedi was lying naked under the sheets next to her. Satine turned, looked at her lover. I should have known, she sighed. That man is a walking disaster zone. True enough. The comm unit chimed again. The Duchess picked it up. Yes. Report? We have multiple calls about a Death Watch attack on a place called Brox's Bar. Missiles, grenades, heavy repeater fire. Whatever's happening, it's a war zone down there. We've mobilized quick response units as well as Mandalorian security. Good. Give me a call when you know what exactly is happening. Understood. We better get up. Satine sighed and stood up. The sheet fell from her naked figure, and the sight of her body made Kenobi shiver. Yes. That would be prudent, Obi-Wan muttered. He was still trying to figure out did he made a mistake in sleeping with Satine, though doing it felt anything but wrong. RK Part 4, Sundari Royal Palace. Sundari Mandalore. I hope the reunion with your sister would go well, I quipped when we reached the palace grounds. Not criffing likely. It's Satine. Bo grumbled. The security personnel surrounding us did their best to pretend they weren't hearing this particular conversation. Well, she couldn't have been this bad when she became the leader of your people. She wouldn't have lived this long if she was… Right. Bo-Katan grumbled something so quiet I couldn't hear it. I didn't catch that. After the war, there were a lot of people who wanted peace and someone who would rebuild in charge. Satine. She got enough support to become our nominal leader, though that was more because many simply didn't care. The rest were either away from our worlds or in the Death Watch. The latter simply didn't have the numbers to be relevant. They took catastrophic losses during the war. I see. Any idea how to make your sister get her head out of her ass? I would prefer that she doesn't get herself killed. Apparently one of my generals is sweet on her. What? Satine with a boyfriend? Heh, not bloody likely. She's too busy preaching about peace and pacifism, not that many are listening, mind you. Well, Kenobi's a Jedi, the poor bastard, though a dose of Mandalorian culture would serve him well. Many of us don't see Satine as Mandalorian. Bo snapped, then she smiled. A Jedi, eh? That might do it, however I don't know what they would do in bed. Discuss philosophy or something. I can see why. I nodded. Obi-Wan isn't a fossil like most of his order, so he might actually know what to do with a woman. I don't buy it. The pair of honor guards protecting the audience chamber gave us sharp nods and opened the doors. They made a halting gesture, and the security left us enter without escort. Inside, we found Satine on her throne. She was wearing a simple green dress, and her hair spilled freely over her shoulders. Obi-Wan and the Prime Minister were flanking her and talking quietly. The Duchess looked our way and froze when she recognized Bo-Katan. I could clearly sense her shock from the doors. Beside that, I could feel irritation and frustration coming from her, along with sorrow for the dead, I assumed. The Prime Minister, he was concerned and curious. The moment he saw Bo, his concern spiked. Obi-Wan was the most interesting of the trio. The Jedi felt somewhat calmer, more balanced, satisfied even. I could still sense his inner turmoil. While it had been growing ever since I met the man, now it was subdued. A stark contrast from the emotions he radiated during our previous meeting here. How curious. Kenobi recognized my companion, then looked between her and Satine. It took him only a moment to figure it out that they were sisters. My eyes widened. Every time Obi-Wan laid eyes on Satine, I could feel longing and lust coming from the Jedi. The latter was absent just a few hours before. There was simple attraction then. I smiled. Who knew that Obi-Wan had it in him? Unless I was very much mistaken, he got lucky tonight. Bo-Katan, Satine hissed when we reached the throne. Sister, my companion sneered back. I should have known that you would be all over this mess. You always loved to make my life difficult. The Duchess spat. Oh my. There was no love lost between those two. You two, what the criff were you thinking? Satine glared at me. Vale, you've been here for just a few hours, and there's already open warfare on my streets. This is Mandalore. The occasional skirmish is normal. Not under my rule, Satine snapped. Oh? You've been actually ruling? That's a news to me. Delkatar, what happened? Obi-Wan raised his voice. The usual, I went to a bar to meet a friend. I nodded at Bo-Katan, who smirked. Then the Death Watch decided to try and kill us. It was just like the old times on Mandalore. I grinned. What about you? You're feeling unusually chipper this evening. The Duchess is a bit disheveled, and the way you're looking at her. I trailed off. What? I'm just... Obi-Wan spluttered. Yep. Bo nodded. My sister looked like she just got laid. It's been a long time, hasn't it, Satine? And with a Jedi of all people. Bo shook her head in disappointment, though I could feel only amusement coming from her. We didn't. Really? Obi-Wan, I had such trust in you. Are you telling me that you couldn't perform? I'm disappointed in you, my friend. You see, I raised my hands and wigged my fingers. There are fingers, tongue too, and then there's the Force. I grinned, making Kenobi go red, something that was shared by the Duchess. They looked at each other. Oh, that's cute. Did you really think that I wouldn't notice? Enough, the Prime Minister snapped. We aren't here to discuss what the Duchess did or didn't do in her spare time. It's your actions that brought us here. Really? I merely dispatched a group of assassins. The survivors are nicely tucked up in the embassy awaiting interrogation. Instead of doing that and possibly finding a way to break the Death Watch, I'm here. Why? General Vale. Satine glared at me. You're threading a thin line. Your actions today are grounds to declare you a persona non grata and throw you out of Mandalorian space. You won't. I sneered back. If you do, I'll consider Mandalore a clear and present danger to the Republic and remove it as such. Satine recoiled at my words, and Obi-Wan blanched. You're serious, Kenobi muttered. I was hoping that you would talk some sense in the Duchess before trying to seduce her. Or did she seduce you? I shrugged. There's only one outcome that might keep your worlds and people reasonably intact, Duchess. It's an alliance with the Republic. Anything else is unacceptable. I took a deep breath. Bo, she's your sister. Try talking some sense in her. She never listens, my companion protested. Try anyway. Kenobi, a word. I waved the Jedi to follow and headed to the crystal windows covering the left side of the chambers. 85. Chapter 24, Parts 5 and 6. Phase 24, Mandalorian Dreams. =RK=. Part 5, Sundari Royal Palace. Sundari Mandalore. Vale, what the criff is wrong with you? I beamed at Kenobi's uncharacteristic cursing. His Jedi indoctrination was falling apart much sooner than anticipated. First, congratulations for losing your virginity. I grinned. What? I wasn't a virgin, damn it. Oh, so you've been a bad boy before we met. My grin widened. Good for you. Second, couldn't you, besides seducing the Duchess and getting laid in the process, talk a bit of sense in her? That's now what happened. I didn't seduce her. Obi-Wan didn't sound very convincing. So she seduced you? That's it. You aren't negotiating again. Ever. At least was she any good? The stories I've heard about Mandalorian women. I leaned back just in time to avoid being slugged. Whoa, who knew that getting laid would have such an effect on Kenobi? That should be mandatory for all Jedi. It obviously made them act more like people than robots. Down, boy, congratulations. When are you becoming full-fledged Mandalorian? What? That stopped Obi-Wan in his tracks. There's a reason I haven't slept with Mandalorian women back in my time. There are certain expectations that come with the territory, like becoming a Mandalorian. If you don't, once Satine's indiscretion comes to light, what little credibility she has left will immediately evaporate. That's Criff. Kenobi blanched. He was getting pale too. Didn't think about that, did you? What we did is no one's business, Obi-Wan snapped. Please, I know that you aren't that naive. You won't be going out heralding it, Kenobi snapped. Why? It can only enhance your considerable reputation. Veil, Obi-Wan hissed. Then there's Bo, who isn't too fond of her sister, the Prime Minister, who might decide to cut off his losers and throw the delectable Duchess under the airbus. That advisor, the palace guards who are certainly to know what you two were up to. I trailed off. I couldn't keep the cheer out of my voice. This is a disaster, Obi-Wan moaned. What? Are you afraid that the council will kick you out for being human? For blowing up the negotiations? For letting my feeling rule me? Stop playing the victim. You just got laid, and considering how you and the Duchess felt when I entered this room, you both liked it, right? Besides, this is an opportunity. For a moment, Obi-Wan became beef red, then he shook his head and narrowed his eyes at me. What are you scheming now? Well, we have various problems on Mandalore. I beamed at the Jedi Master. You just gave me a way to solve most of them, though certain sacrifices are to be made. You may even enjoy some of them. I chuckled. Yep, this might work. At the very least, it was going to buy me some time. I know that look. Obi-Wan's voice grew suspicious. First, you're going to quit the Jedi Order. I chuckled at his dumbstruck expression. What? Are you out of your criffing mind? Kenobi exclaimed. Oh, shut up and listen, I snapped. You made your bed and now you're going to lay in it. You and Satine just gave me a potential way to save Mandalore. Is your pride worth the millions who will die if we criff up our mission here? Obi-Wan glared at me but remained silent. Good. Second, you're going to officially hook up with the Duchess. I pointed at her behind my back. After that, you're adopting the Mandalorian culture with a gusto and becoming the best criffing Mandalorian warrior that this rock has seen in the last few thousand years. That's your plan? It's insane, Obi-Wan spat. Then we will ensure that you become Mandalore so the warriors will flock behind you instead of joining the Death Watch and the Separatists. That way, we'll short-circuit the worst of the impending civil war, use our forces to aid the Mandalorians in eliminating the CIS fleet presence here and in the nearby sectors. Oh yeah, Mandalore becomes an ally of the Republic too, so I don't have to go old-fashioned Sith on the place. It's a win-win situation. Besides, if you're lucky, you got to marry your Duchess and have a hot steaming sex with her on regular basis. A win-win situation if I ever saw one. I beamed. Is she a screamer, by the way? I asked idly. I was too busy congratulating myself about my latest brainstorm that I didn't react fast enough when Obi-Wan's fist rocketed my way again. Ouch! If you try this again, I'll slug you back. I snapped at the fuming Jedi. This plan's our best chance, so you're getting one for the team and might even like it, so man up. Veil, you're an utter and unrepentant bastard, Obi-Wan hissed. There was loathing, and was that admiration in his voice? Thanks for the compliment. The man was already practically a grey Jedi, so I was successful on that front at least. RK, Long time no see, sis. Have you managed to utterly destroy our clan's reputation yet? Bo-Katan sneered. Our reputation as murderers, you mean? I hear you keep it up nicely. Satine spat back. You're a disgrace for Mandalore. Bo snipped back. Only for the old bastards who refuse to see that their ways are obsolete. Naive much? What has your way brought us? We are on the eve of destruction because of you and the new Mandalorians. Bo-Katan snapped. Nonsense. It's all because of your kind. Fools who cling to our past as the scourge of the galaxy that we're in this position. If it wasn't for the Death Watch, this war would have never come to our doorsteps. You're a fool, Satine. The vaulted clone army of the Republic? The template was a Mandalorian. It's trained by Mandalorians. Bo-Katan hissed. We've been neck-deep in this war even before it began. Satine recoiled back as if her sister punched her in the gut. That man over there. The Mandalorian warrior pointed at Vale. He's a Sith, Satine. He will burn our world and love every moment of it unless we support the Republic. We don't have the forces to give him pause. The Separatists, they would do the same. Why, you may ask? Because we are too weak to have a voice. It's join or die, all because of you. Mandalore is about to die because of your blindness. The Duchess stared at her sister open-mouthed. Was is worth it? Bo-Katan sneered. What did your policies give us? What are you going to do now? We have to remain neutral. It's our only option. Satine shook her head in denial. Yours, you mean? Oh, I know it. If you chose a side, the new Mandalorians will throw you away. If you don't, one will be chosen for us. Don't you get it, sister? We don't want to be neutral even if that was an option. This war, it makes our blood sing. It's in our blood. It's who we are. Open your eyes, Satine. Bo-Katan implored. They're opened. I can't bring war and suffering to our people. Never again. Did you forget the Civil War? What it cost us all? I do. Bo-Katan's voice was quiet. I lost as much as you did, sister. However, that didn't break me, the warrior woman shouted. I can still see the galaxy as it is instead as what I wish it to be. No matter what you or the new Mandalorian wanted. We Mandalorians aren't pacifists. We aren't peaceful people. We are warriors, Satine. War is in our blood. We had more than a decade of peace under my rule. Why did you all want to throw it away to join the war? Satine snapped. Isn't it obvious, sister? We merely existed under your care. This war, it makes our hearts race. It calls to us, to what we are. You are supposed to be our leader, Satine. Your people are screaming that they want to fight. There are only two questions. On whose side would we fight? And who will lead us? You have a unique opportunity, Satine. You can restore our clan's honor. You can lead our people into a new age, or go down as a traitor to everything that we as Mandalorians stand for. RK. Part 6. Sundari Royal Palace. Sundari Mandalore. This is madness, Obi-Wan snapped. Satine didn't look too much against my plan. Well, she seemed receptive of the part where she hooked up with Kenobi, preferably in a way he won't be able to escape her clutches. That's a first. I would have to agree with the Jedi. Bo-Katan frowned. That put a damper on my good cheer. Why? It's perfect. Just look at him. I pointed at Obi-Wan, a genuine warrior who has won a lot of victories and glory. A criffing Jedi. No one would believe that he would put the Mandalorians' well-being before the Republic and his order. Bo snapped. I won't, and I'm a new Mandalorian through and through. The Prime Minister supported my companion. We've been at odds with the Jedi and the Republic for more than 5,000 years. Nearly 5, in fact. Ah, Criff. That little fact did escape me. Sometimes I did forgot when I was... Especially since I arrived at this place. Mandalore was inducing a lot of nostalgia, even if it was quite the different place from what I remembered. The place simply felt similar, familiar. It's irrelevant anyway. No matter what I may wish, Obi-Wan grit his teeth, I can't leave the Jedi Order. Not now. With Anakin's trial coming soon, if I did anything to show that I would follow my heart in spite of the Jedi teachings, it would tear apart the Order. That's something that you know. Am I right? Kenobi glared at me. That would be a possible outcome. I nodded diplomatically. There are less than 10,000 Jedi. There are billions of people on this world alone. I smiled. That's low blow, Obi-Wan snapped. You know, I was almost convinced that your naysayers in the Order were mistaken. Yet here we are. He glared at me. Hey, being here and now wasn't my idea. I didn't create this mess either. It's all your girlfriend's fault, I snapped back. I'm merely trying to find an acceptable alternative. Really? It's just a coincidence that your plan puts me in an impossible position. If the Order sunders, there won't be any real opposition if you go on the deep end. Perhaps. I didn't force you to sleep with the Duchess. I didn't send you to seduce her. Or did she seduce you? I shrugged. I'm merely taking an advantage of an opportunity. An opportunity to deal the Order a blow it may not recover from? Obi-Wan snapped. I know that we, the Jedi, have our problems. That's no reason to destroy the Order. I won't let myself be used in such a way. What choice is there? Satine muttered. He's right. She pointed at me. If we do nothing, Mandalore burns, either at his hands or because of Death Watch. Without the Jedi Order, the whole galaxy may well follow, even if I trusted him without reservation. Another finger pointed at my chest. He's not the only Sith. Hey, I'm the only real one, I snapped back. Sidious, Dooku and their pose were nothing but pretentious dark Jedi, even if their leader was really powerful. Besides, when did she start making sense? It was my turn to point fingers, and mine targeted Satine. Del-Qatar, you've been away for a long time. Bo-Katan sighed. The Mandalore you know is just a legend now. The warriors you're comparing us to might have followed a Jedi. The stories are clear. They would have loved to follow Revan after he crushed them at Malachor 5. Today, there has been too much bad blood, too many conflicts with bitter resolution. We as a people aren't ready to follow a Jedi, perhaps even Revan. Besides, he was a Sith at the end. She smiled bitterly. Your Jedi friend. If we put him forward for Mandalore, that would guarantee a civil war. Just enough warriors would support him to ensure it, but even more will flock to the Death Watch. What then? You know your people better than me. Is there someone outside those idiots who can be a viable candidate? If there was, they would have stepped up to prevent the impending civil war. We have seen the writing on the wall, Del-Qatar. We don't want to fight against each other. However, there simply isn't a figure who can unite us. Not a Mandalorian, at least, Bo muttered. She was looking at me funny. Then she smiled in a pleased way. All my warning bells started screaming. A Jedi would be unacceptable. However, you gave me an idea. Her smile grew, her eyes twinkled with mischief. There's another general who covered himself with honor and glory in the war. A warrior who many will follow. A Sith. Bo was grinning at me. This is madness. If the Senate even thinks about it, they would move to have me dismissed from the army. A lot of the non-clone officers will support them too. It would be seen as a Sith taking steps to rebuild the Empire. Perhaps. Bo-Katan smiled wickedly. You'll have to make certain sacrifices, that's true. Will that stop you from doing the right thing? The honorable thing? Mandalore needs you. You said that Mandalore the Dauntless was a dear friend of yours. Will you let his people fall when you can stop it? The Council will lose it too. They will think that your people will be his personal army. Obi-Wan groaned. If he becomes a Mandalore worthy of the title, we will be. Bo poured more fuel on the fire and relished every moment of it. You're telling me the nicest things. I sighed. The worst thing was that I was tempted, oh so tempted. It would throw most of my plans of disarray, yet the promise of power, real power not beholden to the politician on Coruscant, or more importantly to Sidious was incredible. Bo-Katan walked next to me. I beseech you, help me save my people. She paused. Our people. I fought you. I fought beside you. I know that you have more in common with a Mandalorian warrior than anyone else living in today's galaxy. Please. The very thought of an army that would be mine was intoxicating. I looked Bo-Katan in the eyes. I didn't think that there was anyone in this day and age who could read me so well. What about you? What do you want? I asked. She smiled wickedly. To fight beside you. Perhaps more if you're up to the task. You still owe me a sparring match. Bo leaned closer. Stop flirting already, Satine snapped. A Sith Lord for Mandalore. Are you insane, sister? Bo-Katan turned to face the Duchess. Who else? Your boyfriend will be unacceptable. It would take years for him to disperse the taint of being a Jedi. A peacekeeper, all thanks to your policies, I might add. We're about to enter war as divided people. Without strong leadership, we're doomed. It will be a repeat of the Civil War, but 100 times worse. She looked back at me. I know what your original plan was. It wasn't too hard to figure out, pushing me forward as Mandalore. If we had a few more months, perhaps a year, it might have worked. Now, I'm no one. Just another warrior who supported Death Watch. Even worse, Bo nodded at Satine. She's my sister. So that's not in the Pazak hand we've been dealt. Do you know what the worst thing was? Any credible refusal I could give would be a self-serving one. After all, the reasons I had to refuse were simple. Unless I played my card perfectly and had a lot of luck, becoming Mandalore would be tying my hands and reducing the power I now wielded. Doing so would also bring much more scrutiny than I had to face right now. Of course, I couldn't go out and say any of that. After all, my plans for the future wouldn't be exactly welcome by the present company, Bo excluded. After all, I had already decided that the Republic as it existed today was an obstacle to preparing the galaxy for the Vong. 86, Chapter 24, Part 7. Phase 24, Mandalorian Dreams. =RK=. Part 7. Sundari Royal Palace. Sundari Mandalore. Me becoming a Mandalore. That would be a disaster for various reasons. I sighed. By the Emperor's shriveled balls, how in the 9 Corellian hells did Bo think of this? Like what? The warrior woman gave me a sweet smile, while her voice was similar in tone and volume to that of a particularly pissed-off drill instructor. Hi, Bo-Katan, it's Vale, the Dark Lord of the Sith. How do you think that the Senate and the Jedi Council will react when they learn of this idea? They won't be thrilled. The saner until now, Kry's sister shrugged. Vale. Obi-Wan cleared his throat. Whatever they do if you become Mandalore, it would be worse if I was to get that title. Kenobi the Warlord, Obi-Wan the traitor. I can already hear them. The Jedi Master spoke in a dry voice. Let's not forget that you'll get blamed on corrupting me. So, it will be much, much worse. After all, that idea of yours would prove everything the more conservative council members say about you. Corrupting Jedi, making them warlords, preparing to conquer the galaxy, then torture and kill everyone for fun. Seriously? I need a better PR department for when I take over the galaxy. Try co-oping Satine's. Bo grumbled and got my attention. Hers that good? Hey, I'm right here. How do you think she remained in power for so long, given her policies? This is Mandalore, Bo growled. I have to admit that our government has an excellent PR department, the Prime Minister added, even if he looked a bit embarrassed to admit it. Good to know. It's likely that I'll get kicked out of my position as general in the GER. I tried again. Unlikely. If the rest of the officers have any brains, they would scream bloody murder. You're one of the few Republic generals who know what the criff they are doing. Bo didn't buy my next argument. Besides, if you're Mandalore, you'll have an army anyway. One arguably better, though we do lack a decent-sized fleet and some other equipment. Almec supported my companion. At least he was seeing which was the wind was blowing. Even if all that's true, I can't possibly help coordinate and plan a galaxy-wide war, command an army, and be Mandalore at the same time. There will be a lot of warriors willing to help you. Bo beamed. Even a few competent administrators from my sister's government might prove useful. She glanced at the Prime Minister. Valentra will be thrilled at the reinforcements. I'll help take some of the load too. Obi-Wan added brightly, the bastard. I'm sure that Pelion will help as well. I wasn't going to point out that accepting the position will leave me with no time for scheming to speak of, which was a problem because I had a lot of schemes going on. Same for scrutiny. Even if the Mandalorians were going to like most of what I was up to, I couldn't allow my endgame plans to become a public knowledge. Not at this junction. Perhaps. The Senate and GAR High Command will put me under so much scrutiny that I won't be able to do my criffing job. I tried again. You're a Sith. You'll deal. Kenobi was positively unhelpful. Besides, you'll get personal guard as per tradition. They will be able to run interference when necessary. Bo-Katan beamed at me. She was liking this, the infernal woman. I was running out of arguments too. I couldn't say that I didn't want the job. Becoming Mandalore was a great honor, criff it all. Declining it, even the possibility of trying to be one, would destroy me in the eyes of the Mandalorians, the present company included. Have you thought what would happen if I become Mandalore? The CIS will throw everything they have available against you. We may not be able to hold such an assault. Really? This is your argument? Bo rolled her eyes. You almost sound as you don't want the job, she said accusingly. If we ally with the Republic, with you, they will be coming against us with everything they have anyway. In that case, you'll be gaining a Mandalorian army, so they will be doing their best to kill us all, after we've been weakened by an inevitable civil war. Bo sighed. While I hate to agree with my sister, Satine trailed off. That might be Mandalore's best chance. Criff it all, I didn't have the time for this. Yes, becoming Mandalore would be great boon, especially long-term. However, it would prove a major distraction. I just knew it. Perhaps big enough to prove fatal. As things stood, I already had too many hats to fill. On the other hand, I was in a criffed-up position. With the shenanigans coming from Coruscant, I would be blamed no matter the outcome. Yet, Plan A was on hold or destroyed. It would depend on Padme recovering and Anakin retaining something resembling a positive reputation after the trial. With Amidala out of the game, perhaps permanently, I lost her political contacts and thus allies. Criff. I needed a stable power base that couldn't be pulled from under my feet with an lawful order by the Chancellor. For the time being, he simply couldn't remove me that way, not without committing a political suicide. However, when I inevitably criffed up with or without Sidious's assistance, that would change. The truth was that I needed the power base that Mandalore represented almost as much as they needed my help. Let's talk terms. I have some conditions if I'm to do my damn best to become Mandalore. Bo beamed at me. The woman looked almost ready to hug and kiss the criff out of me. She felt like that in the Force too. Satine, on the other hand, was resigned, while Almec was hopeful. Kenobi, on the other hand, was relieved, the bastard. I smiled. I had plans for him too. He wasn't getting scratch-free from this fiasco either. Then had to suppress a frown. I could feel only vague buzzing from the aide. The man was trained to hide his thoughts and feelings from the Force, something he didn't bother use during our previous meeting. How curious. Needless to say, that had my alarm bells ringing. That man wasn't going to blab about this meeting before we were ready to go public. I had to make sure of that. Terms? Bo frowned after a moment. Yep, she was going to resent the very idea that I wasn't jumping with joy at very mention of the idea she proposed. One of the reasons I wanted him as a possible candidate, I nodded at Obi-Wan, is that he would be great in facilitating the transition between the current government, a military one aiding Mandalore in ruling, as well as in smoothing over things on the Republic side. In theory, that's true. I'm a capable negotiator. Kenobi nodded. There was no trace of pride in his words. They were just a simple statement of facts. You're going to do that anyway. I smiled. The good news is, you won't be quitting the Order. My smile turned mischievous. That concerns you too, Duchess. I can't have a government crisis on my hands at this time. Fat chance, Bo muttered. First, you two. I waved at Kenobi and Satine. Get officially hooked up. I don't really care if you have a real relationship, sleep with each other, get married or whatever. I want at least a believable pretense anyway. What? Obi-Wan exclaimed in surprise. At the same time, Satine looked torn between indignation, anger, and being quite pleased by the prospect. Kenobi didn't appear to be against the idea either. Obi-Wan, you're getting to be an advisor, ambassador, and general for Mandalore. By remaining a Jedi, you can convince both the Order and the Senate that you're taking one for the team in order to monitor me and make sure that I won't go on the deep end. That's insane, Kenobi spluttered. Tough, you'll have to sell it anyway. Misery likes company and all that. Besides, would you trust me with a Mandalorian army at my back if the Jedi overreact again and you aren't here to keep my response sane-ish? I smiled. That's blackmail. Obi-Wan snapped back. Whatever works. You all want to make me a damn politician besides everything else I have on my plate. You're all helping. I turned my attention to Satine. I have no words for how much you criffed up. The Duchess glared pure murder at me, all points I bought myself by trying to hook her and Kenobi up. Just evaporated. I couldn't care any less. You are getting in touch with your PR people. The task is to convince Mandalore and the Republic that when you took power, it was a response to the death and destruction caused by the Civil War. That's true. Satine looked confused. Then I pointedly ignored her. You are to convince them that all you really wanted was to rebuild Mandalorian space and give a time for your people to recover before the next war, so they could once again be the warriors you know them to be. For that to happen, you needed to rebuild both the civilian and military infrastructure first. Unfortunately, thanks to the CIS, your plan was only partially successful. Now all Mandalorians have to do their best to protect their homes and prove to everyone that they are the honorable warriors everyone believed them to be. If presented right, that should appease both the average Mando as well as your supporters. I don't need them sabotaging the war effort. Well, that's a great idea, Bo smirked. Sister, if you do this right, only the Death Watch will be trying to kill, instead of what we have today, most self-respecting warriors wanting your head on a pike. Satine groaned and Kenobi winced at that statement. The most interesting were the reactions of Satine's people. They were unfazed by that declaration, totally unsurprised. So they knew the score too, though the Duchess was either blind or didn't care. Since she appeared to be an idealist, it was probably the latter. That should be doable. With a bit of luck. Almec nodded. He was very pleased at my latest idea, though I wasn't sure if it was because it was likely to keep Satine alive or him in a position of power. Is that all? The Duchess asked in a frosty tone. Of course not. I glared at her. The woman was in a sore need of a reality check. That would be one of Kenobi's tasks. I thought that he'll be eager to do it. The man was apparently smitten with Satine and would like to keep the impossible woman alive. Criffit, she was as bad as Padme. If this insanity is going to work, I'll need ASAP meetings with the most powerful and influential clan heads briefings on them too. I'll see to it, the Prime Minister stated. I was starting to think that Almec was running the government, with Satine being a little better than a figurehead, though she was probably going to disagree with that assessment. Now the space slug in the room, the Death Watch. We need them neutralized yesterday. I won't have a major civil war on my hand, though purging the diehards is going to be inevitable. That's true. My former comrades have a core of followers who are fanatically devoted to Vizsla. Then there are outright criminals. They will oppose a purge, especially the slavers. Your thought on that had reached their ears. And they will fight. Bo nodded at me. Good, those bastards need to die. I won't condone slavery in any place under my authority. I hissed aloud, letting them all hear the steel in my voice. How do we deal with the Death Watch? Obi-Wan asked. Propaganda. The warriors who joined because they saw no other alternative. I need them. We are going to persuade them that a Mandalore me is what they have been searching for. I'll be offering them honor, glory, and most importantly, victory. That might work. Almec must. Second, expose the Death Watch. Bo-Katan has some information on their shady activities. We strike at any illegal operation they have in this system, do our best to take prisoners and break them, thus finding out more. The assassins we have in custody will be a good starting point. In fact, I'll be interrogating them before we act on Bo's information. I didn't add that a lot of her knowledge was going to be obsolete. The assassination attempt proved that. Anything else? I have proof that the Death Watch betrayed the last of the true Mandalorians and led a Jedi strike team to their location. I smiled. That's a two-edged sword. Obi-Wan sighed. You'll hardly have to prove yourself anymore in light of that information. You're already a Jedi Master, and as far as I know, you had nothing to do with that debacle. No, I was here, protecting Satine at that time. Kenobi shook his head. So you two have been lovebirds for that long, and yet there are no marriage or kids. Do you really know what to do in bed with each other? Next to me, Bo-Katan didn't even try stopping her laughter. The rest looked either stricken by my words or embarrassed. Ah yeah, diplomats weren't supposed to act like me. Haha, it wasn't like being all polite and gentle would have helped me in this mess. I was a bastard of a Sith Lord and had a reputation to keep. Next, armed forces. I have contacts who will be able to provide some quantity of weapons and armor, as well as purchase more. That will help. I need to know how's the Mandalorian military-industrial complex nowadays. We'll need small arms, armors, combat vehicles, and most importantly ships, and a lot of them. I recommend you speak first with Horus Yogamet, the chairman and of Mandal Motors. He's also one of the most influential clan leaders, Almec said. Good, I'll need a briefing on him and a meeting first thing tomorrow. I'll arrange it. The Prime Minister nodded. How can you provide weapons? One of the special operations groups under my command is currently posing as a PMC. They will help. I didn't add that they were likely to back me even if I went against the Republic. That's useful and probably outside of your authority. Republic intelligence knows and actually helps. Valentra too. I smiled. I had my bases covered. It was pure accident that after the attacks on Coruscant and Windu's stunt, none of the above really trusted the Jedi or the Senate. Our sparring match. Bo smiled wickedly at me. We should make it public so people could see you fight in person. I stared at her and slowly nodded. Only an idiot would have thought that she didn't have ulterior motives for that suggestion. By the Force, why did she have to be a gorgeous redhead besides everything else? This was another complication I didn't need, though I had the sneaking suspicion that it was one that I might enjoy very much. This is a good starting point, Obi-Wan declared. Indeed. We have an interrogation to run. I nodded at Bo, who looked eager. From what I felt coming from her, she was one to keep a grudge. Good to know. We should have a liaison with your people. I waved at Satine. Your advisor will do. He's coming at us, so he can rely to you anything else I can think of tonight. My voice broke no argument. 87. Interludes, Mad Science. Interludes, Mad Science, =RK =. Interlude, Rebirth 1, Republic R and D Center. Location classified, Coruscant. Dr. Solemn, it's almost done. The single blood and flesh surgeon in the room in front of the director spoke aloud. The human medic was busy overseeing 6 spherical medical droids which were working on a clone trooper who had been grievously wounded a few months ago. Is it going to work? Solemn asked. It's too early to say, sir. Though the initial tests we're running are positive, the subject will live this time, that much I can promise. We need much more than simple survival or even partial recovery. The director must. Besides, the latter can be achieved with commercially available meditech. I'm no, sir. However, adding so much tech into a body, especially one as wounded as Ark here was. The human shrugged. We both know that it's not impossible. There are more than a handful cyborgs more enhanced that are prototype here. Solemn looked unimpressed. True, sir. However, there's one huge difference. They're practically a work of art, not something that can really be mass-produced. Further, we don't have access to the research of the people who did those enhancements. Most are beyond Republic space, and those here are very well hidden. The surgeon grumbled. What are the prospects for Ark? Solemn sighed. Quite good, actually. His missed limbs were replaced with state-of-the-art combat prosthetic. We built them from lightweight armor alloy for increased durability. They will make him about 4 times stronger. The surgeon sounded proud of himself. We were expecting 10-fold strength increase. The director wasn't impressed. I know. There's a problem with the connections to the blood and flesh body. Those joints simply aren't durable enough. In latter models which are more enhanced than Ark here, that problem will be solved. Speaking about durability, we've coated his bones with bio-neutral ceramic alloy, which makes them very hard to break. Further, his spine is reinforced by cybernetic implants, and so is his skull. That's good to know. Side effects? We had to implant him with a couple of devices that help his bone marrow generate the proper amount of blood cells. We even went a step further and poached a few things from Project Ascension. His blood is not more efficient, coagulates much faster, and as a beneficial side effect, Ark will be highly resistant to a lot of poisons and toxins. Well, that's good at least. Still, we'll need much more than this. We know, Director. Ark here's just our first prototype. We're just finishing installing his Bacta injectors and will start on the subdermal armor graft soon. That will give him unprecedented survivability in combat, though nothing like what we're planning. Unfortunately, a lot of the tech we'll need for Stage 2 is still theoretical or in the early stages of development. The good news is, if Arki here is successful, we'll be able to return tens of thousands of soldiers back to the field within 4 months. What we learn from Stage 1 will be invaluable for the next part of this project. This is better than I feared, though not as good as I hoped. We'll get the job done as soon as possible, Director. =RK=, Ascension 1, Republic R&D Center. Location classified, Coruscant. Director: Dr. Skrin, a Kaminoan mercenary, who was the leader of Project Ascension, exclaimed when she saw the Duros enter her domain. "You're just in time." She waved a long, thin arm at him and smiled. "The first batch of volunteers will be decanned shortly." "From your reports, I understand that Stage 1 has been an unmitigated success," Solemn stated after he nodded a greeting. "Indeed." Skrin's head bobbed over her long neck and she beamed. "Here we aren't constrained by what peak species performance is supposed to be." The scientist scoffed at the mere idea that her work should stop at what evolution had achieved. "That was never the idea. We need something more." The director nodded in agreement. Thanks to this war, they were not only allowed but expected to push the boundaries of science beyond what anyone had dreamed in ages. It truly was a great time to be a scientist. "We have reasonable, safe gene therapy that can bring people to their species' peak performance within 3 months. Once that has been tested," Skrin grinned, "we'll be ready to push further into the next level." "Good. Walk me through what you've achieved," the director ordered as they walked further into the facility. First were the easy things: stimulating muscle growth, increasing bone density without compromising the skeleton, making the blood more efficient. Skrin waved a hand. "We got that done by combining already existing research and therapies, then improving upon them. It took a couple of months, but it was quite simple." The woman spoke dismissively. "You did much more than that," Solemn stated as they reached a sealed door. "Of course." Skrin scoffed and went to the scanner on the left side of the door. "We improved reflexes and reaction times by tweaking neurotransmitters and upgrading the nervous system. As a side effect, our test subject have increased pain thresholds, but their appendages are a bit numb." The doctor shrugged as if it wasn't a problem. The door slid open and revealed a large chamber filled with hundreds of Bacta tanks. Almost all of them were full with beings of various species. We also tweaked various organs to make them more efficient, especially when processing various toxins and poisons are concerned. Thanks to the changes, Stage 1 subjects are expected to have a minimal resistance to nerve agents, though they will be by no means immune to them. "Useful. How do they compare to the clones?" "At least as strong. Some will have better reflexes, and they will be healing faster. The main issue was tweaking the gene therapy to work on many species. If we were going to improve just humans, Stage Y would have been complete 2 months ago." "I see. Good work. What have you cooking up for the next stage?" Solemn sounded quite satisfied with what was done. "This will be the fun part, even more efficient organs, as well as adding redundancies for anything vital. We already have 30% success rate in adding a secondary hearts in humans." Skrin beamed. "Benefits? Harder to kill subjects. With the improved blood we're developing, they will heal 3 to 4 times faster. The downside, as with most of our enhancements, will be increased calorie consumptions to fuel them." "That was a given." Solemn nodded. There always were trade-offs. Skrin's job was to make the benefits worth it. "We're looking into further strength and speed increase, about 4 to 5 times the norm. That would allow soldiers to carry heavy armor and weapons, and will make outfitting the troops cheaper. I understand that the power armor we're developing will be very expensive and not practical to outfit everyone with." "That's true. It's also one of the main reasons we're putting as much resources in this project." Solemn nodded. "We won't disappoint," the Kaminoan declared solemnly. "We're working on upgrading the nervous system as much as we can. We hope for 2 or 3-fold increase in reflexes and reaction speeds. However, there's a hard cap we'll be reaching with neurotransmitters. We won't get as good reaction as the rebirth units that would replace or enhance the nervous system with fiber optics. That won't be a long-term project." We'll be combining the later stages of these two projects anyway. The director waved a hand in dismissal. That would be interesting to see. Skrin nodded. Next, we're looking at increased endurance, which will take some tweaking in most subject systems. However, that won't be available before Stage 2 is well underway. We still have some problem to solve. The director shrugged. He had seen the failures. It was ugly and regrettable, but they learned from those accidents. We've also improved the vision of the subjects, added increased night vision, and are working on adaptive lenses for the eyes. That should increase accuracy. That's splendid. We're also looking in biological subdermal armor and ways to increase the toughness of the skin without crippling side effects. Those two will be reserved for Stage 2 or 3. Skrin must. You can always use the subdermal armor from Rebirth, the director proposed. That's something we're looking in, along with a synthetic alloy that should act as a replacement skin they are looking into. Unfortunately, the latter's in the theoretical stages for the time being. Time frame for Stage 2. At least a month before we can start fully enhancing a test subject to that standard. I see. It's better than projected. I want Stage 1's testing done ASAP and ready for distribution in the Army before the new volunteer units finish training. HICOM wants them enhanced before they're deployed. Within 3 months, right? That's when the first new non-clone divisions will be ready for deployment. We'll be ready to implement mass enhancements in 3 months, plus minus a few weeks, but we'll need increased funding and resources to create the necessary infrastructure. Skrin spoke after thinking for a few minutes. Consider it done. The director nodded. $RK=, interlude, the CIS and their toys. Techno Union R and D Center, Trinity. Location classified, Outer Rim. Count Dooku sat at the head of a long table made of black metal that was polished so much that it resembled a mirror. His current apprentice and one of her henchmen took seats to his right, and a pair of heavily augmented humanoids did so on the other side of the table. Foreman Cleo, the Sith Lord, nodded politely. Congratulations are in order. The Union leaders simply did what was logical. Cleo's modulated voice showed no inflection. You aren't here for small talk, the cyborg stated. No, our time is precious and the war still rages. That leaves little spare time for the more refined things in life. The Sith shrugged. In the last few months, the Republic has unveiled a number of advanced technologies and weapon designs that played a key role in halting our advance. We can no longer consider this war winnable in a short order. This poses certain problems. Isn't that the understatement of the century? Dooku thought. We're well aware. There was just a hint of annoyance in the foreman's artificial voice. Our R&D departments had worked hard to ensure our superiority. We have a number of technologies either ready for deployment or near completion. The cyborg paused. However, they won't come cheap. Producing them takes more time and resources than our current armies. Most of the B series of droids are practically useless in the field. The new shielded armor the Republic deployed on Geonosis made the B-1 and 2S totally obsolete. Even the SB subtype are heavily outclassed. Severance spoke for the first time. Her voice was flat and annoyed. We know. Analysis shows that continued production of B-series for anything but naval crew and maintenance units will be a strategic mistake. The second, so far unnamed cyborg stated, This is Ilreth, one of the Union's primary strategic planners. The foreman introduced his companion. Dooku gave the second cyborg a nod and waved him to continue. We've already ceased B-1 and 2 type production and are shifting those lines into either SB subtype or BX Commando series. We're introducing gradual upgrades in armor and firepower to our SB droids, though outfitting them with shields will be difficult in the short term. There are some design issues with using the components of our destroyer lines, and we don't currently produce another shield and power plant small enough to fit in their chassis, Ilrith stated. I trust you're solving that issue. Dooku was less than pleased by that information. We have multiple teams working on the problem. Cleo interjected. Analysis on the data brought by Agent Tan and her unit shows that our most effective counter in the short time will be to shift our ground forces composition into SB and Commando Heavy one. Ilrith continued as if he wasn't interrupted. However, Our projections show that if we are to win, the Confederation will need new and more powerful types of droids. It's true, all but the commandos were almost useless. Once the Republic outfit a significant number of units with their new gear, most of our fronts will collapse, Tan added. We all know the problems on the ground. Solutions. Dooku frowned. We have plans for certain prototypes, though they were deemed too expensive and unnecessary by the Council. The foreman sounded smug. Enlighten us. Cleo tapped a button on his right arm, and a holographic image came to life above the table. A streamlined humanoid droid was standing at attention. Its armor was all made of sharp angles, and obviously made to resist blasters and slugs. While it had a superficial resemblance to the commando droids, it had more in common with Grievous Magna Guards and the SB series. This is the SBX-1 concept, Ilrith spoke in his bland, emotionless voice. It combines the best series of our current combat models with increases durability, agility, and it's smarter than the commandos. Its programming includes improved tactical analyst algorithms, strategic modeling, as well as self-updating system, allowing them to actually learn, not simply extrapolate from previous data as our current BX units. In fact, programming-wise, the SBX type are close to our tactical command droids, though not as smart. That's simply not required. That might be useful, Severance muttered. Why aren't we already deploying them? We only build a single prototype. It was deemed too expensive and too good for the role it was supposed to fill. According to everyone, the BX series were more than good enough, and the SBX were simply a waste of resources, Ilrith reported. We'll need them to replace the commando droids in their roles across the board, as well as a power multiplier attached to our more regular forces, Dooku said. I want production to start ASAP. I'll see to it, my lord, Cleo stated next. The SBX image was replaced by a 2.5 meters tall behemoth. This machine appeared to be hunched forward. It stood on two curiously shaped legs, which had a metal shield protecting the front side of their vulnerable joints. The arms were surrounded by built-in weapons, a flamethrower, a heavy repeater on the left, and a laser cannon above the right. There was a missile pod above the left shoulder and a large cannon sticking above the right. This is the Titan concept. Ilrith started speaking. It's protected by a prototype tank-grade armor, 3 shield generators, and built-in laser AMS. The cyborg sounded almost giddy. This design is a direct answer to the New Republic gear. Most of its internal components are off the shelf, and we're already producing its weapons in one form or another. Its role will be twofold. First, assault directly engaging enemy-hardened positions and large groups of infantry. Second role is battlefield coordination and command. The Titan will have a modified tactical command droid, programming allowing more efficient use of our forces in its area. We're already building a prototype. Once any major flaws are removed and we can field test it, we'll move into mass production if the Titan proves to be a practical design. That's it. Severance looked less than pleased. The rest is incremental upgrades of our current units, more powerful weapons for the SB series, and improved small arms for the rest of our droids and biological units. The foreman answered. Analysis proved that we have an advantage in indirect fire artillery. The lack of sufficient such units on Geonosis is one of the main reasons the enemy suffered minimal casualties in comparison to our own. We recommend increase in production, as well as focusing research on improving this type of technology, Ilrith added. Do so. Dooku nodded after a moment. Space. He stared grimly at the cyborgs. The unexpected effectiveness of the Guardian system and its mass deployment rendered our current doctrine obsolete. Cleo actually grumbled. As you know, we relied on massed droid fighter swarms as a major power multiplier. That strategy is now rendered obsolete. Further analysis concludes that all existing small craft, from fighters and bombers to heavily protected assault shuttles, are unsurvivable in Guardian-dominated environment. Further, long and medium-range missile and torpedo strikes will be heavily degraded or neutralized before hitting a target. I'm aware of the implications. I need solutions. Dooku glared at the cyborgs. A possible tactic is one demonstrated by the Republic above Ryloth and Geonosis. Pinpoint hyper jumps into point-blank range, followed by massed torpedo strikes. Unless a hyperspace exit is calculated perfectly, the Guardian systems of a fleet will be able to significantly degrade such attacks. Other counter include a deployment of gravity well generators to ensure that any such strike is dragged into real space at a safe distance. The Republic isn't ready to deploy interdictors at this time. I want small craft outfitted for such strikes in the immediate future before the enemy can adapt, Dooku ordered. Still, that's a very short-term solution. We're aware of that, Ilreth. Cleo let a note of amusement into his voice. While we'll continue production of munificent-class ships, we won't be expanding it. With our fighter contingent neutralized, a trade of multiple munificents for Republic cruiser will no longer be to our strategic advantage. We propose to shift the frigate's role back to their intended one, raiders and escorts. We propose increased production of our latest class command ships, the Providence-class dreadnoughts, as the main combat unit of our Navy. We'll be modifying most of them to reduce or remove the carrier role and use that space for more weapons and armor. That's an idea I like. Dooku nodded. What about small craft? We're playing with various designs and upgrades that may make them of a limited use against Guardian-equipped targets, but even prototypes are some time off. The good news is that we just finished testing our own version of that system, the Umbrella. Its production lines will be ready within the week, and we estimate that in 2 months all our capital ships will be outfitted with it. Any new or still unfinished ship will be receiving it. That's the kind of news I want to hear. Dooku smiled for the first time since the meeting began. What other plans to enhance the effectiveness of our Navy do you have? Multiple, including 2 rather controversial strategies, Ilrith stated. I'm listening. Dooku leaned forward. He felt that he'll like what he was going to hear. First, our most powerful ships, the Subjugator class. We'll need more of them, especially after the Corellians entered the war. We're proposing some modifications so they can fit different combat roles. Second, we want to expand the production of Lucrehulk type above Geonosis they did best, though the lack of Umbrella made them very vulnerable to small craft strikes. Once our vultures were torn apart by the Guardians and enemy fighters, our battleships were simply overwhelmed. We want to introduce a few distinct variants of the typical Lucrehulk for either system defense or assault of heavily protected systems. I'll want more information later. What else? Dooku asked. There's a certain project that's in the prototyping stages right now, Ilrith started. It's about a new type of battlecruiser, which, while quite expensive and relatively slow to build, may prove a game-changer, especially in view of the Republic Star Destroyer program. Speak, Dooku ordered. I'm talking about the Bulwark program and the Bulwark Makar 1 battlecruisers, which it has produced. Ilrith pressed a few buttons built in his arm, and the image of the Titan was replaced by a ship that was a cross between a flying brick, which had its edges rounded into sloped armor, giving it an ellipsoid look. There were 2 stubby drive sections attached near the back of the hull, though they were dwarfed by the main engines of the behemoth. There were a lot of turbo laser and ion cannon emplacements visible, and those were just the main guns. There were scores of smaller weapons, presumably for the Bulwark's Umbrella. The Bulwark Mark I is projected to be the most powerful ton-for-ton warship in known space. Most well-protected, too. It has enough armor to ram through smaller ships without shields and emerge with minimal damage. Ilrith actually sounded excited. The first prototype will be ready within the month. I'm requesting authorization for mass production once all major problems are fixed. Once the prototype is ready, I want a comprehensive report on its performance, problems, how many of those ships can we build in a reasonable amount of time, and how it will affect the production levels of our remaining space forces. Dooku ordered. You said something about controversial tactics. I'll see it done, my lord. Ilrith nodded. About the tactics we're proposing. 88. Chapter 25, Parts 1 and 2. Phase 25, Breaking Dawn. =RK=. Part 1, Republic Embassy, Sundari, Mandalore. Leave us. I ordered the guards, who were non-clone Republic soldiers. They saluted and left us with the prisoners, who were stripped off their weapons and armor. The two men wore bland tunics and were cuffed to a metal table in a small room in the basement, which was used for interviews by the RI branch in the embassy. They were sprawled insensate on the table thanks to the sedatives I ordered administered when I dropped them earlier. I wasn't taking any chances with the assassins somehow escaping or killing themselves. "Do you want to do the honors?" I asked Bo and offered her the injector I had been given from the medic who sedated the prisoners. "It will be a pleasure." My companion smiled and grabbed the device. Merrick, Satine's aide, whom I poached earlier, had a mighty frown on his face. It deepened when Bo pulled up the head of the first captive and jabbed the injector in his neck. I could feel apprehension and fear coming from the aide before he managed to get his feelings under control. I was almost sure that he knew these men. Well, well. So we might have another source of information. This evening might not be too bad, the whole becoming Mandalore fiasco excluded. One more jab and hiss of hypo spray, and the prisoners started stirring. "Do you really think that they'll talk?" Merrick asked in a calm voice. I had to give him that. Besides the momentary slip, he was keeping a great facade. Who said that they have to say anything? I smirked and walked next to the closest assassin. I grabbed his short hair and pulled his head back, then placed my right palm on his forehead. "I'll simply take the information." I submerged myself in the Force, took a hold of the dark side, and slammed my will through the barely registering mental defenses of the awaking man. Before he could understand what was happening, I was in his head and delivered a hammer blow to his mind. I felt him reeling and struck again and again. Within moments he was stunned, his will broken before he could start putting up a fight. Then I drove into his memories by forcing his mind to call what I needed to see. $RK, $. I let Howell Zen's head go, and it hit the metal table with a dull thud. Goran Kranz, the assassin's leader, and my other prisoner growled at me, but didn't react otherwise. I could feel his anger and defiance. There was no fear. He was either exceptionally brave or an idiot. Merrick, on the other hand, was scared. He had to be wondering what I got from Zen's mind before the warrior's brain became a mush under the strain of my assault. Next to the aide, Bo-Katan was observing me. I could feel a mix of curiosity, grim satisfaction, and mild disapproval coming from her. While most Mandalorians were practical people, they were never thrilled by the mind games a Sith could play if he had the skill and power to back it up. "Merrick, tell me, how long have you been a Death Watch sympathizer? How long have you been aiding them and their separatist friends?" I raised an eyebrow at our guest. His face featured more than a few times in the memories I tore out of Zen's head. "What? That's preposterous," Merrick snapped. "Your emotions are betraying you, kid." I smiled as his fear spiked. The aide tried to pull something from under his ornate robes. The moment he started moving, I slammed him in the nearest wall with a telekinetic strike. An instant later, Merrick was looking at one of Bo-Katan's heavy blasters, which she shoved right under his nose. "He's been assisting Satine for years." Bo shook her head. She obviously had no idea. The disappointment towards her sister Bo felt had an almost physical presence. At least he should have some useful info. "Please make sure that he doesn't do anything dumber." I carefully patted Bo's shoulder and turned my attention to the other prisoner. Goran from Clan Kranz. I shook my head at him. My voice was sad, and I used the same tone I would if I was scolding a child. "Did you really think that your little attack could harm a Sith?" I asked. Well, the answer was obvious, unless he was working under a flawed intelligence. The assassin simply glared at me and refused to speak. "So brave, so defiant. It would be commendable if you wasn't a common criminal." My lips twitched in disgust. That man was the closest thing I've met to a real Mandalorian warrior beside Bo-Katan, and he was content with being a two-bit gangster. The same could be said for his squad. At least Locke though so. Kranz snorted, but otherwise remained silent. I really hoped that the rest of the Mandalorians were head and shoulders above this lot, because otherwise my decision to become Mandalore would be one of my biggest mistakes ever. I shrugged and stalked towards the assassin. It wasn't like I had time to properly interrogate him, so it was going to be a mind rape again. A few minutes later, it was all over. Kranz did have some decent mental training, and his brain lasted for a much shorter period under the strain of my attack after I shattered his mental defenses. At least I did get some juicy pieces of information. The locations of 3 Deathwatch bases which were built after Bo fell under scrutiny, along with a few weapon caches and the names of 2 agents within Satine's government. "Did you get anything useful?" Bo asked after giving an uneasy look at the brain-dead prisoners. "Yep, we have some additional targets. They knew you were on them for weeks." "Criff," Bo snarled. "They wanted to see who I was working with, didn't they?" "Yep, Vizsla authorized the hit once, that idiot." I pointed at the drooling form of Kranz. "Told them who you were meeting at Brox's. They had rented an apartment across the street to watch Brox's." "I got sloppy," Bo groaned. "It happens. You got lucky too and are still in one piece. That's what matters in the end." "I thought that you wizards didn't believe in luck." "That's the Jedi's thing. They're usually all about the will of the Force and such. I'm a Sith. We criff what the Force wants if it doesn't suit us, and we make our own luck." "What about this piece of trash?" Bo pressed her blaster in Merrick's face. "He might be more useful alive. After all, our prince here's royalty. No matter who Kalevala will support, they will disavow him until the shooting starts. Then it sucks to be him. It's time to get briefed on the clan heads and catch a bit of shut-eye. Tomorrow will be a very long day." "The traitor." "Knock him out," I shrugged. $RK=. Part 2. Mandal Motors HQ, Sundari, Mandalore. Arranging a meeting with Mandal Motors' CEO turned out to be rather easy. A call from the embassy, right after a few suggestions from the current government, who were one of the corporation's major clients, were enough to open the door. Getting there went without accident too. The Death Watch were apparently laying rather low after yesterday's incident, while Vizsla and his spin doctors were doing their best to paint the assassins as a rogue group. He might have wanted to sing another song, but his people failed. So not only did they paint their organization as a bunch of murderous lunatics, but what's worse, incompetent ones. Further, Satine had announced that she would be making a speech concerning every single Mandalorian at noon. Hopefully, she wasn't going to criff it up. However, those were concerns for another time. I glanced at Bo, who was my designated companion/advisor for all things Mandalorian. She was wearing her Death Watch armor, however it was repainted. There was no sign of that organization's markings on her apparel. Instead, she was wearing an urban camo pattern. We discussed it and decided that until we could clear Satine's reputation, and by extension that of their clan, it would be unwise for Bo to wear the Kry's colors, no matter how much she wanted to. We arrived at the corporate HQ shortly before 8 in the morning, flying one of the embassy's speeders, and landed in a private docking bay, which was near the top of the tall building. Mandal Motors' seat in the capital was a large, broad skyscraper, which almost touched the ceiling of the biodome covering the city. The building was in the form of 3 towers glued next to each other. The eastern was the shortest, about 40 floors tall. The western was the middle, about 80, and the last towered above its siblings and was twice the height of them combined. When we disembarked, a squad of armored guards met us and escorted us to the CEO's office. When we reached his floor, the head of security was waiting for us with 20 more heavily armored men and women. "I'll have to request your weapons, General Ma'am," the Mandalorian woman stated. I glanced down at my armor and the various built-in weapons. A few personalized suits, made almost up to the standards of my old Great War Era 1, finally were completed and shipped to Chimera. Just a few days after my part on the ground there was concluded. Talk about great timing. "Unless your boss wants to see me naked, that won't be practical." I nodded at the built-in dart launcher in my left arm guard, the vibroblade under it, its twin on my other hand, as well as a few other nice toys. The head of security stared at me for a moment and pressed a button on her left arm. The light in the ceiling above us flashed, emitting a wave of blue light. The scanner beam passed over us a couple of times before the light turned red. An unpleasant beep emanated from the ceiling. "You were supposed to be here for a talk, General," the woman snapped. "I am," I waved at myself and Bo. "This is a simple precaution if the Death Watch tries to kill us again in a public place." "There's no Death Watch here." Good to know. Not that I was going to take her word for it, even if it was true. The last time I checked, a warrior meeting a Mandalorian clan leader unarmed and unarmored would be considered an insult, considering the business we're here to discuss. That stopped the woman short. She and the rest of the security stared at me for a long moment. There were very few ways my words could be interpreted by a Mandalorian, knowing their history and culture. "I see," the head of security muttered. She stood still for a few seconds, probably using her comm with the external speakers cut off, which would ensure we would hear nothing of what she was saying. "You're cleared to meet the CEO." The woman gave us a Mandalorian salute, a fist thumping her armor over her heart. A moment later, the security guards relaxed, took positions along the walls, and saluted as well. That was a very interesting development. While the guards wore only Mandalmota's symbol on their grey armors and no clan markings, the way they reacted outright said that they were Clan Yumajit men and women protecting their leader. That wasn't really a surprise. A man of the CEO's station would be best served if he was kept in one piece by his own clan's warriors, if he had enough of them willing and able to do so. I returned the salute and Bo followed suit. I could feel that she was mighty pleased by this development. This show of respect was dedicated for a clan leader or warriors who had covered themselves with a lot of honor and glory. It wasn't something that one of Satine's supporters would have thought to show to anyone, nor a lot of those aligning themselves with Deathwatch and the CIS. The head of security, who still hadn't introduced herself, and no one had bothered giving me her name during the briefing I got on Horus, waved us to follow. She was scanned at the end of the corridor, which ended in an armored door. The woman removed her right gauntlet and placed her bare hand on a security panel to the right, and quietly whispered a series of override codes. Only then the armored doors slid open to reveal a large and tastefully decorated office. The walls were lined with pictures of various vehicles, from speeders and fighters up to and including massive battleships. I saw a few of the cruisers the Mandalorians used in my time and smiled at the memory. There were 6 columns flanking a marble pathway leading towards a large wooden desk. They were almost a meter broad each and made a nice cover. I had no doubt that there would be weapon emplacements inside. Between the columns, I saw statues of Mandalorian warriors clad in different armors, from light recon suits to bulky assault plate that could shrug off heavy blaster fire. Horus Yomajet stood up to greet us. He was a short man, barely a bit over 170. He had a crop of brown hair that was just growing on a previously shaved head. Horus wore a 2-piece black suit. General Delkatar Vale and Bo-Katan cries. "To what do I own this honor?" Horus asked in a strong and clear voice. His intense pale eyes studied us as we approached. When we reached the pair of chairs in front of the desk, I stood at attention and gave the man a Mandalorian salute. "Clan leader Yomajit, it's an honor to meet you." A very old-fashioned greeting. Horus trailed off. There are few besides my clansmen who would greet me that way. In my time, it would have been unthinkable to greet someone of your station in any other way. I smiled. "Perhaps. You're here for a reason." Horus stared at us for a moment. "But where are my manners? Please do sit down." He waved at the chairs. "Thank you, clan leader." Yomajit gave us a speculative look. 89. Chapter 25, Parts 3 and 4. Phase 25, Breaking Dawn. $RK=. Part 3, CEO's Office. Mandal Motors, HQ, Sundari, Mandalore. "What does the Republic want with my company and myself?" the CEO asked after a moment of silence. "That's obvious, clan leader." I leaned forward. "Let's not play word games. Neither of us has time for that." "Is that so? Then speak." Bluntly. A ghost of a smile ran over Yomajit's lips. "So be it. Mandalore and most Mandalorians by association are going to be criffed in a way none of you will like. That's something you're aware of. We both have certain problems that can be solved if we work together." That blunt enough? I hoped I didn't misjudge the CEO. At least being here and speaking plainly was a refreshing change from dealing with the politicians on Coruscant. Succinctly put. Not too far of the mark either. Though, who's to say some of us won't like the oncoming storm? Well, going out in a blaze of glory is always an option. I shrugged. However, it tends to be rather final. A lot of warriors would prefer that over what has been happening since the Civil War. The CEO stated without showing how he felt about it. Further, his mind was disciplined, protected. He was in control of his feelings too. All I could sense coming from him was a bit of curiosity. "You're here to make a deal," he added. "True enough. Our problems might just solve themselves for us if handled right. It's us now." Yomaget raised an eyebrow. "Preferably, the alternatives are less than acceptable for everyone involved," I said. "What about your friend? A bodyguard? That doesn't really make sense. A friend? A companion?" Yomaget turned his attention to Bo. "Well, she was to be my candidate for Mandalore, but events here unfolded faster than anticipated." I shrugged. "Satine's sister as Mandalore." Yomaget actually laughed. "I didn't know you Sith had such a sense of humor." I saw Bo stiffen next to me. She was royally pissed off at the implication on her character. "Peace." The CEO raised a hand in a placating gesture. "I have no problem with you, Bo-Katan of Clan Kryze. However, our esteemed leader has been dragging your clan name through the mud for more than a decade now. Barring a miracle, no one would support another Kryze in a position of power over us." "As things stand, true." I smiled. On the other hand, if Bo-Katan had an opportunity to prove her worth as a leader and warrior in the war, things would be different. "Ah, so that was your plan." Yomaget studied us for a moment. "It might have even worked, though I have my doubts. Satine has poisoned your clan name among certain circles." He nodded at Bo, who did a decent impression of statue made of durasteel. I had to admire her self-control. "My other candidate has similar problems." "He's a bloody Jedi," Bo hissed. Yomaget gave us a strange look. "General Kenobi. His girlfriend is Mandalorian, and he's likely to concede becoming a part of the culture," I added. "The negotiator? Well, he's a warrior of some esteem, and he has covered himself with a lot of honor and glory." Yomaget nodded. "However, he's a criffing Jedi. Even if he becomes one of us, it would be a long time before he's accepted. There's simply too much bad blood between the Jedi, the Republic, and us." Yomaget narrowed his eyes. "You aren't throwing the names of currently unsuitable candidates just for fun. As things stand, Vizsla is most likely to become Mandalore after Satine's government is overthrown." I stated and stared into Yomaget's eyes. I drew on the dark side and let it flood me. I could feel its cool embrace, and I had no doubt that my eyes had turned yellow. That would be unacceptable. We looked at each other for a few moments. What's new? The Republic would support Satine, and there would be another civil war. Yomaget sighed. "The outcome would be decided by how much troops you or the Confederacy could pour. Though Vizsla will have an advantage, he's the one our people support." "Incorrect," I smiled coldly. "We won't be supporting the new Mandalorian government. They're useless to us. There are two outcomes acceptable for the Republic. Either Mandalore becomes a firm ally with someone acceptable in charge, or I will eliminate it as a threat." Yomaget stiffened. Finally, I could sense his feelings. Only an incredible level of self-control allowed him to remain still and appear to ponder the situation. In fact, the man was furious. I should have seen that. His lips twisted in something that resembled a smile. If you squinted real hard, that is. "I just said that there's a lot of bad blood between us, didn't I?" "The last few months changed the Republic," I shrugged. "It's no longer business as usual. I can see it in your eyes. You would glass my world and love every second of it, won't you?" Yomaget sounded detached. "I am a Sith. It comes with the territory." I narrowed my eyes. He was probably considering his chances to take me out. I was sure that there were built-in weapons around the room, and his guards were moments away. They weren't going to be enough if things got ugly. Hopefully, it wouldn't come to that. After all, I didn't come here to fight, but to deal. You didn't come here to gloat. I'm sure you won't suggest making me Mandalore either. While I've been running a rather profitable business and I'm a respected clan leader, I haven't proven myself as a warrior in a long time. My name isn't covered with honor and glory. The only one who could fill the bill is Vizsla." Yomaget trailed off. "What do you want from us? We would fight against anyone who would try to break us, but that doesn't mean much. Both you and the Confederacy have more than enough troops and ships to simply bury us. What I need is a Mandalore I can be sure won't backstab the Republic at the worst possible moment." I sighed. My best candidates would take months of leading soldiers in battle and distinguishing themselves before anyone would accept them as possible leaders of the Mandalorian people. We already covered that, Yomage muttered. Indeed, that was a problem. I don't want to destroy your people, clan leader, even if I would enjoy the challenge. Fortunately, Bo-Katan here had a brainstorm last night. I nodded at my companion, who was still pissed off. The CEO looked at her. This is going to be good. I just know it. His eyes turned on me. Really? That's the grand idea that's supposed to solve all our problems. All reasonable candidates either don't have the clout for the position, are my enemies, or likely to become such. My enemies don't live long. Well, that was a lie. There were a few Sith Lords that took years of scheming, planning, and undermining of their power bases to take down, though the Mandalorians of today really didn't measure by that standard. Hells, no one really did. How do you expect to pull off such a stunt? There was a genuine curiosity in Yomage's voice, though I could still sense his anger. With a lot of help. Why would I support such a crazy scheme? Why would I choose a Mandalore who would destroy my people if they're an obstacle? The clan leader asked. I smiled. =RK=. Part 4, CEO's office, Mandal Motors HQ, Sundari, Mandalore. Well, you want to speak frankly, there are two kinds of reasons why I want to be Mandalore. It's the same about why you might want to support my bid. I'm all ears, Yomage snarked. The strategic ones, I would rather prefer to have your people as my allies. I know exactly how dangerous the Mandalorians are once you get going. While you're small in number compared to the armies that are fighting right now, you're much better trained than what the Republic could get on the field in the next few years, besides the clones and certain formations from various member worlds. That's a rather charitable view of our capabilities. The CEO frowned. It takes months to properly train a soldier, and they would still be green. Further, that time can't be really cut. Many Republic worlds and systems are sensitive to casualties. Sending new units just to be chewed on the front would backfire spectacularly. That's not an issue for the Mandalorians. You have a core of trained and a lot of experienced warriors. Enough for at least a couple of small armies and a significant number of special operations groups, I stated. That's true. I'm well aware how certain of our friends within the Republic would react to high military casualties amongst units drawn from their people. However, no matter how good we Mandalorians aren't expendable either. Why should we die for the Republic or for the Confederacy for that matter? Good questions. The simple answer is one you know. As a people, you won't be given a choice. Yomage sighed and I chuckled. I see. There are clan leaders banking on the Republic being the good guys to avoid the war, or at least try it until you are ready to make a choice. Am I right? Correct. We aren't ready for war. Not at this scale anyway. In a year? Perhaps 18 months? That would be different. Well, time's up. Both sides want you, and none of us will be taking a no for an answer. Why should we choose you over the Confederacy then? You appear to be the two sides of the same coin. There's one major difference. I had a lot of good friends who happened to be Mandalorians. I would loathe to see their people destroyed by my hands. Yet, I'm a Sith Warrior. I would love the challenge. I smiled sadly. Why should you support me? I can give your people a future. I can give them a cause to rally behind. What's the alternative? You can support a two-bit thug like Vizsla and his gangsters. That's true. Where's the honor in that? That's rich, a Sith speaking about honor. Yomage glared at me. I do have honor, clan leader. True, its form is different than yours, but that makes it no less real. I stood up. Do you? You came into my office and gave me what amounts to an ultimatum. The CEO snapped. I merely stated the facts and they aren't pretty, I shot back. I didn't create this situation, clan leader. Yet, instead of choosing the simple, the easy way, I'm here seeking a way to keep the Mandalorian people whole. A way to raise them into the exemplar warriors I was honored to call comrades. I took a deep breath. Don't mistake me, clan leader Yomage. The best course of action for me personally would be to burn Mandalore down to the ground, to scatter your people and ensure that they would never become a threat. Instead, I'm trying to help you all, and by doing that, I'm risking everything that I've achieved since I found myself in this criffed-up, beyond-belief future. I'm doing it because of Stephen Ordo, Mandalore the Dauntless. A friend that has been dead for 4 millennia. I do it because of every single Mandalorian who fought beside me in the Great War. Good. Yomagit smiled. You have the fire that a true Mandalore needs. Still, you haven't told me why I should support you. As you keep pointing out, we aren't your people. You aren't a Mandalorian. If we're to be ground to space dust in this war, why should we choose to do it beside you? True, I'm not a Mandalorian. Yet, I looked at Bo, who smirked. He owes me a sparring match before that. Her own smile was a vicious thing. It made my blood race. Answer me. The clan leader spoke quietly. All trace of amusement or any other emotion was suddenly absent from his tone. I have a vision for Mandalore and its people. I can give you an honorable cause. I can help you be great once again, and not like a bunch of marauding thugs, but as honorable warriors who would be example for everyone in the galaxy. I can offer you glory and a part in the greatest war in 1,000 years. I can offer you allies and technology. All I ask in return is that you fight beside me, that you make me and my old friend proud. Nice little speech. I want to hear facts, Yomagit stated. I gave him a genuine smile and pulled a data chip from a compartment in my left arm guard, then floated it until it was hovering in front of the CEO. A goodwill gesture. Schematics for personal shields, both standard energy and the famous Mandalorian melee variant. I'm offering the Grand Army of the Republic as an ally, as well as my own resources. My smile widened. I have had my people canvassing old Imperial caches, as well as a few I built just in case. They recovered some very interesting pieces of forgotten technology. There's a summary on that chip as well. Yomagit frowned and put the chip in a reader built into his desk. A moment later, a hollow emitter came to life, and it started projecting various 3D schematics. For a few minutes, the CEO studied the shields, and then he browsed further until he reached the real bait. Do you have it? Operational, not yet. While my people did recover the critical components, it takes time to build in secrecy. How long? 2 to 3 months for the prototype. Afterward, a modified cruiser every 3 months if they keep working in secrecy. If Mandal Motors joins the project, well, that would cut the timetable significantly. Yomagit reached the last file, opened it, and stared. How the criff did you get this? Is it real? The clan leader snapped. Yes, Mandalore the Dauntless was a close friend of mine. Some of my assets helped modify his flagship. With the silencer that show, I got the schematics. The second part of the file is the same ship, modified with modern tech in the areas where it's prudent to do so. Even without the superweapon, this ship can handle the most powerful dreadnoughts and cruisers deployed by anyone today, provided that those schematics are genuine. They are. However, building such a ship would take a lot of time. It won't help us in the short term. No, it won't, Yomagit sighed. A nice little bribe, which comes hand in hand with blackmail. Can you guarantee that the GAR will support us? I can. Even if I'm fired after becoming Mandalore, I have a very good working relationship with the officers who run the Army and Navy with me. They would support Mandalore as allies should, no matter what the Senate wants, as far as you don't betray the Republic. Does that include access to the new weapons and armor? Samples as well as schematics. They would have to be built locally, besides a small number provided for special operations groups. That's fine. Good enough, in fact. What would you do as Mandalore? Where would you lead us if we chose you? I almost had him, even if it was mostly because he and his people were in a tight spot without a good way out. To victory, to honorable and glorious future. I'll do my best to rebuild Mandalore itself and its whole sector into the jewel of the galaxy, one that's protected by the most advanced and powerful fleet in the known universe. I'll help the Mandalorian warriors regain what they had lost. With what resources? What we can get from the CIS when we don't have to bomb them back to the Stone Age, along with as much aid from the Republic as possible. Uniting this whole sector behind Mandalore as close allies would be a good first step after the obvious, dealing with the Death Watch and their separatist backers. It might even work. Yomagit must. You. He stood up as well and pointed at Bo. "Why do you follow this stranger? Why do you want to fight beside him?" Bo-Katan looked him straight in the eyes. "Because he made me see the true faces of my former comrades. Because he offered me a better way, a brighter future for myself and our people. Because he might be able to give us all what we've been longing for ever since the Civil War." Nice words. The clan leader sighed. "It's a sad day. Then we might need a Sith to come save us from ourselves." "I've always believed that the Mandalorians don't need someone to tell them what to do. However, sometimes they do need someone who will lead the way and hope that they will walk beside them on that path." "That's the first thing you spoke as a Mandalorian, instead of a Sith." "Very soon I'm going to be both, if you'll have me." "You might actually do." 90. Chapter 25, Parts 5 and 6. Phase 25, Breaking Dawn. =RK=. And Part 5 was baited by Battleship_Fusu on the Space Battles forums. Thank you very much. Part 5, Vizsla's Office. Deathwatch Main Base of Operations, Concordia. Vizsla sat down in his chair and opened a bottle of Corellian brandy he had taken from the bar when he got in. He needed a stiff drink after doing damage control the whole afternoon and most of the evening. Satine had to do something competent for once, didn't she? Vizsla pressed a few buttons, and a hollow recording of her press conference started playing. This was the first time since the Civil War he saw her clad in armor in the Satine clan's colors. Pre had thought that Satine had disposed of all suits, or at least those which Bo-Katan wasn't able to liberate from their family compound. Considering what had happened the previous day, the armor might very well be one of his former subordinates. And wasn't that a waste? He still couldn't figure out what the Republic was able to offer Bo-Katan, so the woman would switch sides. While she did find some of the shadier activities in which the Death Watch indulged, that shouldn't have been an issue for a warrior woman like her. After all, this was what the Mandalorian warriors were meant to be. Fighters and mercenaries who did everything they could for glory, honor, and profit. War didn't pay for itself, and it was their trade when all was said and done. Why did it matter how they financed it? "My fellow Mandalorians," Satine started speaking. Her voice was loud and clear. More importantly, it was confident. There was no hint of hesitation or indecision. "We've all been in a precarious situation ever since the Civil War ended. Our war industries were wrecked, our homes devastated. The best of us died or were left as shadows of their former selves." She paused. "We literally tore ourselves apart." It was a nice start, direct and blunt enough to make people who would have usually dismissed anything she had to tell listen for once. It also meant a heap of trouble for the Death Watch in general, and him in particular, even if it ultimately gave him a magnificent opportunity. "When I took the burden of leadership in the aftermath of the war, I and the new Mandalorians who supported me wished to give us all time to heal, time to recover, to rebuild. We were in no state for another conflict. Engaging in such would have spelled our doom, no matter how valiantly the remaining Mandalorian warriors would have fought." Satine paused to take a breath. Vizsla could practically hear her conviction as she spoke. It had to be the Republic delegates. No one else was there to make her change her tune at this late date. It was too bad that his team failed to kill that general. Doing so might have avoided this spell of trouble. Perhaps not. Bo-Katan didn't meet with Kenobi, who was a known associate of the Duchess and the most likely one to blame for her change. Further, we were divided. To a large extent, we still are. My people, this has to end. We are at the cusp of a new age. We've finally rebuilt. We've recovered. Yet there are forces out there who want nothing more than to either use us as pawns or see us destroyed once and for all. Both the Republic and the Confederacy sent agents here to demand our support. Satine's fury was clear for all to see. This right there was someone acting like a Mandalorian clan leader should. If she had been always like that, if she had always possessed this fire. Pre shook his head. It didn't matter. It was too late for such thoughts. Both promised us reward if we did their bidding like lapdogs. Both threatened grave, final consequences if we didn't support them, if we didn't take a side in a war that isn't our own. Satine sighed. "I know your hearts. No matter the role I had to play since the Civil War ended, I know. This war calls to me too. It makes my heart beat faster, my blood boil." The Duchess smiled sadly. Personally, Vizsla was pretty sure that this was a lie by omission, but it was good enough for those who didn't personally know the woman. He took a sip of his brandy. Here came the good part. The opportunities for honor and glory. The call of combat at unprecedented scale in 1,000 years. Some lucky few of our people already fight in the war and were a part of it before it even began. There are those who are contracted to train the Grand Army of the Republic. All of them are Mandalorians who are coming back home as we speak. There are the mercenaries fighting for either sides. Yet there's one big difference between those warriors and the rest of us. Satine glared at the camera. There was nothing faked about the fury she displayed. They chose which side to fight beside. We aren't allowed to do so. We weren't contracted as mercenaries or approached as allies. Our allegiance was demanded. That was true as far as the CIS went. Vizsla had talked with their representatives and suggested it himself. It was meant to expose how weak and ineffective Satine was, so once he got power, he could officially negotiate the terms he had already agreed on with the Confederacy. However, the Republic representatives making similar demands, well, that was a surprise. The Jedi wasn't the one behind that, though he could see Kenobi's hand in boosting Satine's confidence and making her show to everyone that she actually had spine. It was ironic. If she had always been like this, Mandalore would have been a different place. Hells, he might have been on her side even. Unfortunately, he knew the woman. He knew that a lot of the details in her speech were warped at best. This was a plot with a certain aim. The other Republic general, Vale, meeting with clan leaders all morning, was a dead giveaway. This, my people, is something I know you won't let stand. Yet, we're still in a very dangerous position. While we've finally rebuilt, we still aren't ready for a war of the scale. A war into which we will be dragged one way or another. If we are to not only survive the oncoming storm, but use it to prosper and cover ourselves with honor, we need to be united. One people. It's time that we leave our petty divisions behind. Satine smiled wryly. I know, it's easy to say, and much harder to put into practice. We don't need someone to tell us what to do, to tell us who to follow. Yet, we need someone to unite us so we can face our fate together. That is why, in 1 week's time, I'm calling for a meeting of all clan leaders here in our capital. The purpose is simple. We need a leader to guide and advise us in this dangerous times. We need a new, worthy Mandalore to lead us in the coming war. That last part threw out most of Vizsla's plans. Launching a coup while the clan leaders were gathering, that would be a suicide. A lot of the new people simply wouldn't stand for it, and he doubted that even with CIS support, he would come on top in such a case. Not with the Republic having a battle group in system and who knew what nearby as support. He knew what the Confederacy had in the nearby sectors, what they could spare, and it was going to be a close-run thing at best. One that was likely to leave Mandalore a ruin unless the Death Watch had more support. Vizsla smiled. Unwittingly, Satine gave him what he needed. An opportunity to run for Mandalore much earlier than he ever believed possible. That's why he had been busy speaking with clan leaders and making deals ever since her conference. Pre frowned. Unfortunately, he had been rebuffed by 2 of the people Vale had talked with. A big problem considering that one of the Mass Mandal Motors' CEO. The question was who the Republic and Satine were trying to place as a figurehead Mandalore. Once he found that out, Vizsla would be able to attack their credibility and expose them for the pawn they had to be. He didn't believe for a moment that all of this was the Duchess's idea. The Republic had bought her somehow, and they were maneuvering to get in their man or woman as Mandalore. Perhaps those Mandalorians who supposedly trained the GER and were coming home. The Republic candidate might be among them, though with no one having heard about who they were or what they did since the Civil War ended, he doubted that one of them could be elected. =RK, Part 6, Clan Ordo Compound, Mandalore. Mira inside, now. A man in his late 40s ordered a tall, solidly built young girl. She couldn't be more than 12. The child was hovering next to him while he was busy repairing a speeder. There were instruments and parts lying on a tarp next to the pair. I'm going. The blonde kid nodded and sprinted into the nearby 2-story stone dwelling. The man gave me an unfriendly look, and his hand fell over a blaster he has in a holster on his right hip. His blue eyes tracked every movement I made, though every few moments they glanced at the shuttle behind me. What does the Republic want with me of all people? The Mandalorian rumbled in a deep voice. He straightened up and moved a step back, so if something happened he could have a better chance to use the speeder for cover. Coley Ordo, I asked. The directions I got from Satine's people brought me here, so hopefully I wasn't going to embarrass myself. He looked like the man I was looking for, though that didn't mean he was the one I needed. According to the records back in the capital, Cole hadn't officially confirmed his status as a clan leader. Who's asking? General Delcatar Vale, are you Cole, clan leader of Clan Ordo? I asked again. I'm Cole. I'll repeat my question. What do you want with me? Ordo grumbled. Not a social person, this one. To talk. The last people who wanted to talk threatened my daughter. Cole glared pure murder at me. I see Deathwatch was here before me, maneuvering to make Vizsla the next Mandalore, aren't they? It was inevitable after Satine's speech yesterday. Still, trying to blackmail one of my friend's descendants, no matter how far removed. That shouldn't really matter, not after that long yet. It hasn't been 4,000 years for me. A year ago, I was carousing with Stephen, shortly before I headed to join the fleet at Korriban, and ending in the future. I closed my eyes and I could almost hear Stephen and Mako laughing. You're to blame for that, I gather. It's no coincidence that they visited me this morning and you arrived just a few hours later, isn't it? Cole asked. While my actions might have led them to search support for Vizsla as Mandalore, the way they went with it, well, it shows their true colors, doesn't it? I smiled. Are you going to support him? Hell no, we're leaving in a few days. The man's glare intensified, and his hand closed over his blaster. I see. Can I persuade you not to? For Mandalore and sticking it to the bastards? Cole's eyes flickered to the house, and his face settled in a deep scowl. Why should I care, besides what's to you? I still owe more than one to a friend of mine, a Mandalorian of your clan, considering that he's in no position to receive my assistance if he needs it. I shrugged. Dead? Even a Mandalore doesn't live for thousands of years. You're that man who claims to be a Sith, from the past no less. Cole's eyes narrowed even further, becoming slits. Darth Vader, no less. Oh, so you've heard of me? I grinned. That was the wrong thing to say. The hostility I was feeling from the man suddenly skyrocketed. I drew on the Force just in time. Ordo drew his blaster almost faster than normal eyes could follow and opened fire. I moved an instant before he did and raised a hand coated with Force energy and slapped the blaster bolts aside before pulling the gun from the man's grip. Cole tried to roll away, but before he could finish diving, I froze him in place with my power. Was that really necessary? I'm here to talk, damn it. The Force warned me a moment before the house's door opened and the kid came out, complete with a heavy blaster she was clutching with both hands. Leave my dad alone, she shouted and opened fire. Accurate too. If I didn't deflect her shots, she would have nailed me in the chest with enough firepower to burn through most personal armor available. Another pull and freeze trick later, I had both Ordos on display. Are you two willing to listen? If I was going to be killing or threatening either of you, I wouldn't have bothered coming here in the middle of the day for all to see. I shook my head. This wasn't the day and age when a Sith could just murder people for fun and not expect retaliation from the local authorities if found out. At least outside the CIS, and that was a good thing. Do I have your attention? I smirked. Good, sweetie. Looked at the girl. When you want to shoot someone, especially using the element of surprise, you shoot first, second and third, then perhaps throw a grenade or two at them. Only then you can shout at the criffing remains to your heart's content. I grinned. You do get points for accuracy. The stasis on Cole ran out and he stumbled on the grass. I froze him again, just in case, and walked next to him. Can we talk like civilized people and a pissed-off Mandalorian girl, or do you want further demonstration that I'm a criffing Sith? I asked and raised a hand in front of Ordo's face so he could see the torrents of purple energy dancing between my clawed fingers. It's getting irritating that people refuse to accept that I'm Delcatar Criffing Vale, Darth Vader, the Dark Lord of the Bloody Sith. The Black Knight, the girl exclaimed once her stasis ran out a moment later. Telling stories, are we? I smirked at Cole. Blame that the Force only knows how many greats-grandfather of yours, Stephen. He's to blame for that moniker. Can we talk now? I asked Cole, who fell on his arse as the stasis ended. He gave me a dirty look, but nodded. $RK $. A few minutes later, we were sitting around a small wooden table in the kitchen with the steaming cups of tea in front of us. Are you really him? Mira excitedly asked. So I've been relegated to children's stories nowadays. I shook my head with wry amusement. It wasn't the worst way to be remembered outside scholars and historians. In a manner of speaking, Cole muttered. How? I'm not sure myself. One moment I was in a fight above Korriban, during the Republic's last-ditch offensive, before we were about to hit them with everything we had. Then one fool activated an experimental superweapon when his flagship was about to be overwhelmed by an enemy cruiser squadron. I blacked out, and the next thing I knew, I was in a different star system in what turned out to be the future. I shrugged. My presence being the will of the Force would have to do. Huh. It's a strange galaxy out there. Ordo shrugged. Why do you want me to support for Mandalore? Mind you, I'm not agreeing to anything. The Death Watch flunkies told me that the Republic is trying to place a figurehead as our leader. Good. I grinned. Hopefully that would bite them in the arse. Let them keep their delusions for however long they last. I'm no one's figurehead. You aren't even a Mandalorian, Cole exclaimed. Not yet is the operative word. There's this woman who insists on a vigorous sparring match tonight. Her grandmother was an Ishani, you see. I smiled. It was going to be an interesting evening. Depending how it ends, there may be a wedding in a few days. A Mandalorian woman, eh? Mako's diaries and the few of Stephen's personal accounts that survive indicate that they tried to hook you up with one of ours in the past. I wasn't really interested then. I already had a long-term paramour. Shortly after her death, I met the woman who became my late wife. I read about that. Nasty business. Cole stiffened and gave me a searching look. It's no secret that the Black Knight's wife, Ashara, was murdered by the Jedi. Yet you work with them. True. I frowned. Everyone who had anything with her death is dead, most by my hand, though a few got lucky by me ending in this time. Today's Jedi Order and Republic, they're both different beasts. The organizations I had a vendetta against are long gone. Who's the woman who have set her sights on you? Mira grinned. Bo-Katan cries. The Duchess' sister. Cole raised an eyebrow at that. Former Death Watch member too, until her former friends tried to have us assassinated 2 days ago. I heard about that bit of excitement in the capital. Hard not to. As you know, blowing bars with the patrons inside is frowned on here. Incompetence too, and the Death Watch are guilty of both and more. I'm pissed off at Vizsla and his thugs, but... Cole trailed off and glanced at his daughter, then looked me in the eyes. It's a lot you ask, not just personally. What would you do if you somehow become Mandalore? Why do you want the title anyway? From what I gather, you're practically in command of the Republic's armed forces nowadays. Becoming Mandalore is likely to remove you from that position, or at least significantly decrease your authority and actual power. True. If I was a typical Sith, it would be a no-brainer. I smiled sadly. There were few people who did more to keep me sane-ish and reasonably stable in hell that was being a newly minted apprentice in the Sith Academy on Korriban. Once my first master pulled me out of that hellhole and started using me as an errand boy and hunter to Sith shock troopers who had lost it thanks to the substandard training at the academy, one of my first assignments led me to Nal Hutta, where I met him and Mako. That was shortly after their team for the Great Hunt was assassinated. Long story short, I owe them both more than I can ever repay. They and a friend I picked up years later are the reason I regained some of my humanity and didn't end as a typical Sith. Mako wrote something like that. I don't think that there are many people who know about it after all these years. What the Jedi have on me doesn't mention it either. I chuckled. Ironically, they're the only people who know and believe the truth. It's rather implausible. What was the first idea? A dark Jedi with delusions of grandeur? Cole looked at his daughter. Yep, She grinned. The holonet is aflame with speculations about you. The latest consensus is that you're your own clone. Mira laughed. Well, it makes more sense than the truth. I smirked. Let them flounder for as long as they would. Being underestimated gives me an advantage. To answer your question, I owed a lot to Mandalore, and I would hate to see his people destroyed. That bad? Satine didn't lie yesterday. The Senate wants the Mandalorian problem solved, and many would prefer that this world burns instead of gaining the Mandalorians as allies. There apparently is much more bad blood than I remember. True. We kept finding ourselves and the Republic on different sides of various conflicts for a long time. Cole nodded. That still doesn't explain why should Clan Ordo support you. While today it's just the two of us. He nodded at Mira. Our name still carries a lot of influence. Unfortunately, so does Vizsla's, and he does have an army of goons. Today, some acquaintances arrive, the Mandalorians who trained the GAR. They will be bringing at least a few commando squads. I'm reasonably sure that we'll be able to keep Mira out of Deathwatch's reach. And if I simply decide to leave as planned, then I'll help you disappear, no strings attached. I owe your clan that much. Cole sighed. I'll think about it. Is there any way to contact you? I nodded and retrieved a comm unit from my belt. It's on a frequency that only Bo and me have. It's secure too.